Good afternoon, and welcome to the October 10th, 2019 Mission Fulfillment Committee. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. They're actually starting right now, so we'll let people get to their chairs. I will just say today we have 4 great information topics. Nobody should fall asleep today because these are very interesting and very pertinent to what we're doing here. And we don't have any real, other than the consent report, we don't have any action items. So you can kind of sit back, relax, and watch the show. I do want to, I guess we have Mr. Garcia and Ms. Zahidi?
Al-Zahidi.
Al-Zahidi, Ms. Al-Zahidi. Thank you for joining us. Great to be where you're at. And we're going to get started right away. So our first item of business is credit transfer between campuses. We're going to have a discussion and report, and I believe that Provost Bob McMaster might be in the audience to give us a little information, along with Associate Vice Provost Van Voorhis. So when you are ready, we are ready. Mr. McMaster.
Good, yeah, thanks. So, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, this is not really a presentation you want right after lunch. This is not the most exciting topic, but it's an important topic. We'll try to jazz it up as much as we can, but it is what it is. Our goal with credit transfer, and in particular, this conversation with credit transfer, is around IUTs, inter-university transfers. Our real goal here is not to have many IUTs, because we'd rather have students stay on the campus that they matriculate on. But there are good reasons why students do transfer. If they're going to transfer from one of our campuses, we hope they come to another system campus, Greater Minnesota campus, not leave the system. But we'll show you some data about the trends. Second point is that we have a whole series of new systems to enhance credit transfer that we put in place over the last few years. And Associate Vice Provost Van Voorhis is going to be getting into some of the details on those new systems that are really helping students transfer their credits expeditiously. So with that, I just wanted to provide a few definitions here because this does get a little complicated. In terms of the flavors of transfer students, we really have 3 different types on our campus. We have new advanced standing. Those are transfers that come in from outside the system. We've talked about those before. Those are your traditional transfer students. We have intra-campus transfers. That is, we have a significant amount of migration between and among our colleges. So students who will come into science and engineering transfer to design or CLA. And we actually talked about some of the issues with ICTs in May, I believe. We have the intra-university transfers. Those are students who are moving from one of our campuses to another, from Crookston to the Twin Cities or Morris to Duluth. And the third type of credit here that we wanted to mention is called a multi-institutional enrollment, multi-I. And that's where a student on campus A takes a full load of courses or a part load of courses on another campus. So they can actually cross over and take coursework on another campus, and we'll show you some data there, although there aren't many students who do that. So if we talk about the IUTs, again, the inter-university transfers, you can see the migration matrix here. What it shows, for instance, is that for the Twin Cities, 18 students transferred from Crookston to the Twin Cities, 213 from Duluth to the Twin Cities, and 14 students moved from Crookston to Duluth. Excuse me, from Duluth to Crookston. And so you can see the total numbers here. As you look at the trends over time on IUTs, it doesn't change much. We went back through and looked at some longitudinal data, and we don't see any kind of significant trends with the data that you're seeing here.
So on this particular slide, what we did actually, students where they applied from Crookston, Duluth, or Morris, to the Twin Cities campus, what we did is we broke that down further for you so that you can see kind of how it weighs out against our colleges. No surprise, many students apply to our College of Liberal Arts, and the way that we make the decisions on our campuses is those are done out in the college office. So for example, if you are applying to liberal arts, a student would have to have a 2.5 GPA, and the prerequisite courses would have to be a C- or better. In our Carlson School, all the prerequisite courses would have to be a C-. They would need a 3.0 GPA, and recommended courses would need to be completed. And all of this information is actually listed on our website so that a student can see that information. The no decision, those are students that did not complete the application process or they decided not to transfer campuses in the end.
In terms of the multi-institutional enrollments that I talked about just a moment ago, this is a similar kind of matrix that shows the credit-taking behavior across the system. So again, what this shows is that 74 students at Duluth took some credits with multi-I at Crookston, and 72 students took some multi-I at the Twin Cities. The students, by the way, pay the tuition rate at the institution where they're taking the classes, not the institution they're coming from. And so again, the numbers are not large here. I think it's an interesting kind of program that perhaps we'd want to promote a bit more than we do across the system, because it enables students to kind of expand the opportunities that they have in specific areas and leverage more of the system as a whole. Just quickly, we wanted to show you the profile of the IUT class for 2019, and the important statistics here include that it is a high percentage of Minnesota residents. 75% of the IUTs, not surprising, are Minnesota residents. A fairly high number or percent of international students. 19% of IUTs are international, and then, of course, you'd expect that students are normally transferring at the end of their sophomore year, where they've accumulated 30+ credits, and so you can see the different credit loads there.
So this is the IUT application process, and it may look a little complicated here, but we've really tried to make it seamless for the student. I'm going to focus in on if a student were transferring to the Twin Cities campus. So any student interested in transferring to another campus, they really need to meet with their advisor on their home campus and really understand the potential consequences of moving to another campus. It's like if you were to change your major, some of the degree requirements are going to change if you do that. The other thing, if you're coming to another campus, is your financial aid or your scholarships could also be impacted. So we want students to understand those potential things that could be negative impacts. So if a student still wants to go ahead and transfer, they need to complete the application, and then that is routed either to the registrar's office or to the admissions office, depending on the campus. The Twin Cities campus actually decides who is admitted out in the colleges, and the colleges will let the student know if they were admitted or denied, and then the student would need to complete the checklist. If students are veterans, we want to make sure that their veterans benefits transfer to the other campus. If a student's an athlete, you have to fill out the NCAA paperwork to transfer to another campus. And if a student is an international student, we want to make sure they don't have any visa issues. So we want to make sure all of those pieces are covered before they transfer to another campus. On the next slide, this is the application that the students fill out, at least on a couple of our campuses. It's just one sheet of paper. There's no admissions fees tied to that, and most of us don't charge a confirmation fee as well. The thing to keep in mind, though, is on the Twin Cities campus, there are some supplemental materials that are required in some cases. So, for example, in our College of Education and Human Development, they need to write a personal statement that goes with this application. In our dental hygiene program, a student would need to write a diversity statement and have an interview. But this is how this particular process works. Go ahead. The next piece I'm going to get into now is actually how transfers credit to the Twin Cities campus. And I'm going to focus on the Twin Cities campus just because I understand that more in depth. We all have this system called Transfer Evaluation System, but each campus has their own instance of this system, and they use it a little differently. Now, we've only had this system a little less than 2 years, and I have to say it's really helped our campus especially, because before, when a student would transfer to our campus, they really didn't know how their courses were going to transfer to our campus. That's not providing very good service, if you ask me. So in the last year, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, we have been able to figure out how courses will equate to direct equivalencies or not on our campus. When we first purchased this software, we were told this could not be done within the University of Minnesota campuses, but the person we actually hired was able to figure out a way to do that, and now we can record if a course is a direct equivalency or not in our Transferology system. And so that has been a huge change. So in the last year, we've reviewed 330 courses coming from within our system, which actually we have an 83% granted direct equivalency, which is actually pretty good. So that's exciting to see. The other thing with this is it's done course by course. It's not done student by student. So what that means is once a course is articulated, we can record that information so the next student that comes along with that particular course, we don't have to start all over again, and the student will have that information. So what a student can do here with this system is they can go to Transferology, look up the course. If the course is not in the system, they can go ahead and submit a syllabus, and then we take that, admissions will review it, we work with the departmental faculty to determine if that course is equivalent or not, and then we let the student know and we record it in our system and upload it into Transferology. So it's pretty slick for the students. This is fairly new within the last year.
So the proof of the pudding here is what happens with actual courses. And so we've picked 4 sample courses here to show you different kinds of decisions that have been made. Remember, these are four examples out of hundreds that we could have pulled. So the first one is Crookston, and again, these are transfers from the greater Minnesota campuses to the Twin Cities. The course is Animal Science 1004. It was given direct equivalency on our campus. That is, the department reviewed that syllabus and the material and said, yes, this is equivalent to our Animal Science 1101, Introductory Animal Science. Good news story. Second one is a Duluth Political Science course, Political Science 3131, Judicial Politics and Policymaking. This also was given direct equivalency to our own political science course, Justice in America. And again, that would have been done by the faculty teaching the course, reviewing the syllabus and the other course materials. The third example is also Duluth, a biology course, 1001, Biology and Society, that was not given direct equivalency in the biology curriculum. You can see the explanation. The biology content differs in focus from our own course. However, the course still transfers as a biology elective. It just doesn't transfer as an actual degree requirement within that department. And then finally, another course from Morris that was not successful. It's History 2551, Modern Japan. Again, not viewed as directly equivalent to a history course, but again, it counts as a history elective. So you can see that although the courses may not transfer requirement to requirement, we often will find a way, more often than not, we'll find a way to make sure the credits will at least count as an elective towards the 120 towards graduation. But that wouldn't be unexpected because you're going to find some differences in the nature of the curriculum and the nature of the courses, the way the courses are taught. And so you're not going to have a 100% harmonization. One wouldn't expect that. This slide simply summarizes some of the equivalency decisions that were made. And so for each of the colleges, you can see the number of courses reviewed, the direct equivalency rate, and then the bar graph on the left simply represents those data. I think one point here is that you will find differences in the equivalency rates because for a very specialized college like CFANS, equivalency might be more difficult than in science and engineering when perhaps you're transferring differential equations or fluid dynamics or calculus or courses that more likely are going to be common between and among departments.
All right, so Transferology is a tool that we actually use between our campuses on how a course is going to transfer. And this is a tool that we have partnered with Minnesota State. And what we do is we feed the data to this tool, and then we actually share the cost. And anyone that has access to Transferology or any school in the country that uses it, any student can go ahead and use this tool. So in this particular case, we have a student on the Crookston campus that took Math 1271 Calculus, and as you can see on the right-hand side, it's 100% match to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities calculus course. So that's one of those direct equivalencies that we've recorded in the system. If a student, for example, attended St. Cloud State, they could put in their calculus course and they could see actually, for the most part, all of our campuses have that as a direct equivalency within the Minnesota system. So a student could see that. However, this is course by course. So if you want to see how your course transfers, you got to do it one at a time, which would kind of take a little bit of time. So on the next slide, actually what you can see is what we actually want University of Minnesota students to use. We have a degree audit system that we call APAS, and what a student can do is run a what-if report. And a student can see their coursework, how it would apply to any major on any campus at the University of Minnesota. So this particular screenshot shows the Twin Cities chemistry degree fulfilled with Duluth coursework. So the green means good, direct equivalency. Red means they still need to fulfill those particular requirements. And the blue means that particular course is in progress. And when they complete that course with a passing grade, that would turn to green. So we really want students and encourage all students to run that what-if report before they even think about transferring to another campus so they can really see the impact or consequences of moving to another campus.
So to finish up here, just a few final slides summarizing some of the results here. One is what we provided here is a checklist. It's a basic checklist for students before leaving the previous campus. Some of the expectations, not surprisingly, they need to cancel their classes, return books, complete financial aid, exit counseling, and so on. And before arriving on the new campus, they have to get their ID card, update contact information, touch base with our one-stop student services. So we're pretty explicit in terms of what students need to do in the transfer process as they leave one institution and arrive at the other institution. Some of the challenges for inter-university transfers, the transfer credit evaluation. So we did experience lots of unhappiness and disquiet before we implemented both tests and Transferology for students who were frustrated with both the nature of and speed with which their courses were transferred. I don't want to say that's completely fixed, but again, these systems have really smoothed over that process. NR students transferring to the U of M Twin Cities may not be aware of the difference in tuition rates, and so there's a bit of a tuition shock when they get here. Students who apply late may not be able to find housing, and if they struggle with that, may return to their previous campus. Financial aid needs to be recalculated because our campuses have different costs of attendance. Each campus has its own federal ID. We're not considered identical for financial aid purposes. External transfer credits, AP, IB, and CLEP are reevaluated on each campus. And then their internet account, which is a smaller thing, has to be transferred. So what are some next steps as we think about continuing to improve the transfer process for students within our system? Continue to grow the number of University of Minnesota system courses evaluated for equivalency. It would be nice if we had nearly the entirety of all curricula in Transferology and through tests, which would significantly expedite that. Increase accessibility of information about tuition and financial aid across the system, and then to enhance communication to students considering a transfer so that they understand the processes and maybe some of the challenges that they're going to experience in transferring. So with that, I think we've kind of covered that topic, and we're very happy to take any questions that you might have.
So thank both of you. I was just counting for a second on how many times I transferred, and it was 3. 2 of them were back to the university after I left once. But your slide about what you have to do at the former school and then the new school, it did leave out stop home and ask for money. Other than that, it was pretty complete. Great presentation. This is really interesting to see how you do this, and the transferology is something I wasn't really aware of. I can see how that really makes it a lot easier for students. And I can also see our different tuition rates for NR. Vital to stop at that counselor's office first, so hopefully the other campuses can tell them that if you go to the Twin Cities, it's going to cost a little more. So terrific. With that, I do know we're loaded up for some questions here, so I'll get started. Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. You didn't mention that you were kicked out.
No, never kicked out. Left and came back. I left and came back. I liked it here so much.
Thank you, presenters. I think you said that once you process a course, it's kind of in the system. So if that's the case, then what happens if the course changes at some point over time or is not offered? Or, how do you know that it changed?
Vice Provost.
Chair Anderson, Regent Shu, members of the committee, we actually do what we call a sunsetting, and so we will review the courses every 3 years, and if a course actually changes before then and we hear about it, we can actually then go in and update that. So we do want to make sure that happens. Now, if a course is no longer offered, the equivalency will not work in the system if we have to sunset a course on our campus. But we do have a review process in place.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Regent Davenport.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and nice presentation. Thank you. Two questions that are related. Have you observed a pattern of transfer? When do students transfer? Your data was fall to spring, but it looks double fall to fall. But is there any kind of pattern, or is it really pretty random? Are students transferring after their first year, their second year?
Chair Anderson, Regent Davenport, the modal place for transfers after the sophomore year, after they've spent a few years, and this is both for NAS and for IUTs. They've spent a couple years, they've been able to complete their gen eds, they're ready to move into a major, and they've found a better place to pursue that major. So of course, there are students who transfer after the first year. We actually have a constraint in place that we do not allow students to transfer without 26 credits because we don't want students with low numbers of credits. We did studies probably a decade ago that showed that they were really bad bets for transfer. And some students will transfer after 3 years in their senior year. You have to complete the last 15 credits on the campus you're going to graduate from. So that's kind of a constraint on that. And then there's a 30 credit rule too that
15 of the last 30.
That's a 15 of the last 30, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Student Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. How are we responding to the challenges of NR students not being aware of the tuition differences between campuses? And what steps are we taking to make sure that those students do know about that before they get to their new campus?
Chair Anderson, Student Representative Garcia, members of the committee. I want to say we can still do a better job with that. We are hoping that all students actually meet with their advisors before they actually think about moving to a different campus, but we realize that sometimes faculty advisors are not going to have all of that information at their fingertips. And so what we need to do a better job of, as soon as this application comes in and a student happens to be a non-resident, we need to then let the student know that their tuition is going to increase. And we do realize we still need to do a better job with that, because we did have a couple students this past year that were caught in that situation. And when we investigated it, a lot of the advisors that are professional advisors understand that piece, but not all the faculty advisors understand that, which is understandable. They have a lot of other things on their plate. So we do need to do a better job of immediately communicating that particular impact.
So I just have a question, a follow-up on that. I think it's great that our counselors help these students and do that, but there's also a point of personal responsibility and self-reliance. Now with our prices transparent and on the internet and everywhere else, these students should be able to look up and find out what the price is going to be. That's a point I have. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To put a little historical context on this, there was a time when it was virtually impossible to navigate your way through all of this. This is a wonderful presentation, and the process that you've developed, I think, is laudable. At the time that the Higher Education Coordinating Board was trying to pull together all of the systems, we found that between the state universities and the university, there was virtually no transferability, that there wasn't any communication to make sure that, again, Econ 101 was 3 credits here, and it was 4 credits here, and 5 credits here, and none between them would they ever satisfy those requirements. And so I think it's been amazing how far the state has come, and how we continue even to work with other systems to try to make that functional as you've described. One of the things that, for my experience, because I was a College of Ag undergrad at the same time, now CFANS, and as well as College of Liberal Arts, there was a petition process. Does that process still exist, and do people use it? Because I know for me, the ability to take credits from one program and identify how they met the requirement in another was very effective. Is that something that students are still able to do?
Regent or Chair Anderson and Regent Rocha, I'm going to ask a question and then probably turn to my colleague for an answer. But are you talking about the transfer of students in ICT from CFANS to CLA? Or are you talking about wanting to take courses? You're in CFANS and you want to take courses that will count from CLA that will count in CFANS. At what scale?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
The question was prompted by the screen that showed that at one campus there was a certain class and there was no analogy on another campus. So when you made the transfer, you would have these credits that wouldn't fulfill a requirement, in that respect. And back in the day, you were able to, if you had a course of that variety, you were able to write up a petition as to what you learned in that course, and then the faculty of the program that you were petitioning to could review that and determine to grant you credit to meet a requirement under their degree program. I hope I'm not getting any faculty in trouble from the 80s, but that was a process that I was able to get credit for a couple of courses that didn't fit cleanly. They weren't considered equivalent, but ultimately when you put the petition together, you were able to demonstrate that you had achieved that educational requirement.
Is there an answer for that?
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, members of the committee. You can still petition if you feel, and an advisor will actually encourage students to petition to see if that course will actually meet a degree requirement. And that happens all the time. My son went through that process as well. Now, when you were in school, also, it was very interesting transferring between colleges, because that's when I first started here. And just to transfer between colleges, you had to petition almost all of your courses, which didn't make any sense to me when I started working here. And so when we went to semesters, I said, we need to start acting as at least a campus, and because it was separate entities, and now we're acting more as a system. So when you came, you almost had to petition everything. I'm guessing if you switched from CFANS to CLA, where that has been taken away, but you can still petition for meeting a degree requirement if you feel these courses will, or this particular course could satisfy that degree requirement. That is still available.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow a finishing comment. We had a low graduation rate at the time, and you know, the running line among people was just navigating this process proves to employers that you have stick-to-itiveness and ingenuity and you're wily, and so it's nice to see that we're able to allow people to focus on their education and not have to worry so much about the administrative process. And that's before we start talking about how you registered at Fraser Hall off of sheets of paper that were changed clearly by the time you ever got from your advisor over there, and it's a long story. But thank you, appreciate what you do.
Just one comment. We figured out other ways to show people how smart our students are.
Right.
So on the slide that's in front of us, I have a question. It goes to St. Cloud State University calculus, and it goes to the 1, 2, 3, 4 100% match, 170% match at University of Minnesota Crookston. Does a person still get credit for, even though it's only 70% match? Does he still get credit? He or she still get credit?
It may not be a direct equivalent, but Crookston would take that as a math elective.
Okay, because it's in the green or whatever. Okay, thank you. I think there are no more questions up here. You guys did a terrific job. Thank you very much. We'll get the next people up. I'm just going to mention that Mr. Langworthy pointed out to me that because I actually transferred from CLA to mortuary science at one time here, I transferred 4 times in 4 years and still graduated. So that may be a record. Our next...
Went to summer school.
No, I didn't go to summer school. Our next subject is going to be on faculty retention and our risk mitigation of how to keep people. Provost Hansen is going to move to the table, and I guess she's going to be joined by Associate Professor Blocker, Associate Professor Longmire, and Professor Alver, who will eventually have some stories to tell us about their programs. So Provost Hansen, did you want to start?
Thanks. Sorry. Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the board. I am really glad to have this opportunity today, along with these 3 members of the faculty, to talk to the board about the critical issue of faculty retention. We've been looking at the heat map, and this is one of the things that we've regarded as an important risk to the university. There are benefits and costs of faculty retention. We want to talk a little bit about both of those things. I'll talk first a bit about the direct and indirect costs to the university when good faculty members depart, the factors that affect retention, and the approaches we take to mitigate faculty departures. You'll then hear from these 3 faculty members, all of whom also have administrative responsibilities, with real examples that are tied to these issues of faculty retention. There are many ways in which faculty recruitment and retention operate differently in academia than recruitment and retention do in many other sectors of the economy. And I want to say for good reasons. And that's part of what we hope to give a bit of a flavor of today, why this matters and the way it matters, and what the costs and benefits are of being attentive to this problem. It's important for us to recognize the differences between the kind of employment system in academia and elsewhere in order to understand the risks associated with faculty retention. First thing I want to note, and this is just slide 2, is that the process of hiring faculty is expensive, and it's costly in more ways than that may be at first obvious. At the heart of faculty hiring are faculty hiring committees. It's not, an HR department that takes a bunch of applications and then places somebody in the position. There are faculty committees putting a lot of time into hiring. Any department that's given an authorization to hire typically uses a faculty committee to decide on the area of specialization desired. And again, that takes faculty expertise to know what they need in their field now. That's why it's a faculty committee doing this. They need to write the job ad because, again, their expertise is required for that. They need to go to the professional meetings where interviews take place to interview prospects. And then the whole department is involved typically as finalists come to campus for interviews. Faculty hiring, again, it can't be assigned to a non-specialist HR department. Faculty take time away from research and teaching to plan for the search, to screen applications. And in many fields, there can be hundreds of applications for a given position. And so the faculty have to read those to evaluate them, and then they have to take the time, often in another city, and then again on the campus to interview those candidates. They know how crucial to their own work any addition to the department will likely be, and as a matter of fact, only faculty in the field have the expertise to evaluate candidates. This is, again, I just want to underscore, this is really important. It's what makes this issue slightly different from many sectors of the economy. It's very different, especially from entry-level hiring. If there's a position in physics and you're going to be hiring a new, young, minted PhD, just finished his postdoctoral work, physicist, and you're going to be hiring into a tenure-track position, you have to have people who understand physics and understand where the field of physics is going in order to do the hiring. But that play a role actually in the when we hire people at the tenured level. But I know my limitations. We have to go on the basis of what the people in the field say, and all I can do at that stage is say, whether or not this looks like a CV with the right sorts of letters of recommendation, the right sorts of background experience and publication in the right fields, but it's the people who are actually in those fields who have to be involved in this way if we're to do this well. So that's the first and one of the most crucial elements in the cost of faculty recruitment. All the faculty time and attention that has to go into it that isn't then going into something else, teaching or their own research. Then there are startup costs, which can be quite considerable in some fields, not so high in others. But you've seen this in the docket. Faculty startup packages are received at the time of hiring very greatly. Basically, again, differing very much by field, ranging from just a few $1,000s to millions of dollars to set up labs. In some instances, additional investments such as lab space renovations or new equipment may be needed in order to provide the infrastructure required for specific sorts of research. Those setup or startup costs have to be regarded as investments. If a faculty member then moves on, that investment may not yield all that you wanted it to yield. And that's one of the reasons, again, retention is an important consideration for the University of Minnesota. It may be that the thing has been specially configured for somebody with just that research program. If we lose that program, we may be able to reuse the equipment and we'll reuse the space, but we really have lost something of the investment, and it hasn't, in particular, yielded what we wanted it to. Beyond that, if a faculty member moves on, again, and I'm talking about rating, moves on because of rating, not because we've decided, about an untenured faculty member that it's not working out and the position is ending, but because if we lose somebody because of rating, the department may have to scramble a great deal in order to deal with that loss. There'll be disruptions typically in teaching and advising, perturbations in research collaborations that faculty member may have been key to, and that can be both on campus and with industry partners. We may have severed connections with community groups that faculty member had nurtured or engendered. we may lose recruited graduate students, not just students who then won't come, but often when faculty leave, they take their graduate students and their postdocs with them. Offers often include that they can bring, so many of their graduate students with them. So we lose a lot of research power in that way. That really is not uncommon. So when valued, successful faculty are recruited away, those losses and disruptions can be serious and can have long-term impacts on the department and on the university. It's not as if every loss of a faculty member can immediately be remedied by simply hiring somebody else, particularly if the faculty member is more senior, with an established reputation that pulls in students, and frankly, other faculty. Sometimes the faculty who are already there are the key to being able to get other good faculty. Somebody with an extensive research enterprise, and that's either with independent grants, which they would take with them, or even if they are in a field where their research is not heavily supported by grants because it doesn't have those kinds of expenses. The loss of the research enterprise and the universities being known for being a star in that area of research is a heavy blow to reputation and ranking. And so the distinctive important place in the teaching and public profile of the department can be endangered by the loss of very good faculty. So we're on to slide 3. The most compelling factors in a faculty member's decision to leave are also perhaps the most obvious: higher salaries, better research infrastructure at some other prestigious university could be reasons for a faculty member to leave, and they will cite those reasons. We do exit interviews with people if we can grab them. So we try to find out why they're leaving and whether the things we could have done better in that case. Also frequently cited are things that we may be less able to do something about, though we can sometimes do something about this too. Sometimes it's family reasons. And sometimes it's simply, the geography of where people feel most comfortable, or perhaps where they have friends and family. So some of the factors are beyond our control, but they aren't always. And the things that are beyond our control are not necessarily the only or the decisive reason in a given case. Salary is an important factor, of course, and many times our faculty get outside offers we cannot come close to matching. There's evidence, though, that many other factors beyond compensation are relevant. We often do retain faculty making counter offers that are well below the offers they've gotten from someplace else. Faculty certainly want to be where they feel they can do their best work. I mean, that is, I think, the most crucial consideration for most faculty. So the climate of the work environment matters. Factors such as diversity, collegiality, quality of and support for graduate students, quality of undergraduates, quality of research support infrastructure, including not only labs, but also the library and various administrative structures, the way we run the university, whether we make obstacles for faculty or we try to ease their work. Those things make a difference, and they can have a decisive impact on a decision to stay or depart. So, on to slide 4. What do we do when we're faced with the loss of a faculty member we don't want to lose, or a faculty member who has an attractive offer from another institution? We do usually make a counteroffer. This is very tricky, though, especially for department chairs, because counteroffers can throw off the balance of a department. That's a consideration chairs and deans are constantly juggling. They may have 2 very good faculty members. Somebody is in a very hot area and they get an offer and they get a big salary raise, and somebody who may be just as good and just as productive is now sitting at a much lower salary than somebody else. And what was once a happy department may not be so happy anymore. But that's just the way it is. I mean, it's not all a matter of merit. Some of it is market in specific subfields. So and again, some things we can't do anything about, but one thing we want to do, and it's something that helps people not even have their heads up or not answer the phone when raters come calling, is to try to keep faculty working happily so they don't listen to the siren song of outside offers. It's important to recognize and reward extraordinary faculty contributions. We do have a lot of mechanisms for that, internal awards and honors, such as the Distinguished McKnight University Professorships or the Regents Professorships, are powerful retention tools, important not just for the emoluments associated with them, which may be smaller than those that the faculty expect to receive in salary elsewhere, particularly from some private universities. It's rather the sense of recognition and institutional respect that's often crucial to keeping faculty happy where they are. Again, faculty are generally self-starters. They mainly want to do their best work, and they want to be in a setting that allows them to do their best work. So those are things we can work on administratively. If we recognize them in some of these ways that the board has endorsed, we help them create, both functioning departments, well-functioning departments, high-functioning departments, allow them the mechanisms to have cross-disciplinary work, networking opportunities if they want that. We sustain interdisciplinary centers and institutes of research for that reason. If we support the necessary infrastructure that allows them to do their best work, we are helping retention. So there are a variety of things we can do to foster institutional loyalty and the conditions of successful work. And to say more about those issues from the inside and how they've wrestled with particular cases, I've asked 3 of our faculty who've had a lot of experience with these matters to share the lessons of their experiences. I'll just introduce all of them, and then they'll speak without further introduction. Professor Ellen Longmire is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Science and Engineering. Professor Peter Alver is the Department Head of the School of Mathematics, and Professor Jane Blocker is the Associate Dean for Arts and Humanities in the College of Liberal Arts. And we were going to begin with Professor Longmire.
Terrific. You're welcome to go ahead, and I apologize. I said associate professor before, and I knew it was associate dean. I just can't read my own writing, so I apologize, but you guys can go right ahead, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Ellen Longmire from the College of Science and Engineering, and I guess what I'm going to try to do is provide you with some representative dollar amounts related to some of the financial costs that we face if we lose a faculty member. And typically those faculty members that receive these offers are really the stars, right? Other universities in this country or around the world really want to attract those people. So I'll start off and I'll try to give you an example. This is an engineering professor who is very well established and seen as an international leader in his specialty. He, through his own work, has a lot of funding from mostly government agencies to the tune of let's say $1.6 million per year that he brings in. So I have a statistic here, $5.2 million over the last 3 years. And first you might ask, where is all that funding going? And most of it goes to paying grad students, because if we are in science and engineering, we have to pay grad students to study. They could otherwise be working in industry and making a high salary. So he currently funds 14 graduate researchers, and that includes their salary, benefits, and tuition. One student these days costs us about $60,000 a year. He funds also 3 senior research associates who are PhD level researchers in his group. And also, as part of these funds, typically you need some staff support, which could be in the form of IT, some secretarial type staff, let's say within the department. So he funds part of the departmental staff as well, their salaries and benefits. In addition, what these grants fund typically are supplies to do research. If they're experiments, there are a lot of expenses associated with performing the experiments. If they're experts at, let's say, supercomputing, some faculty have funded their own supercomputers because they're continuously using them. So that gives you some idea of where all these funds go. Those are just the direct funds. Then on all of our grants, we pay indirect costs to the university, and those fund the infrastructure, the library, and so on. So that gives you some idea. And what else I want to say about that is a faculty member like this works and collaborates with other faculty across our college, sometimes across multiple colleges, and brings in younger people and mentors them so they become involved in this research, they become successful. So someone like this, if they depart, it's really a huge loss. And that's what I'm trying to convey. On the other hand, if said person leaves, we need to recruit someone new. In science and engineering, the startup package is very steep in many of the fields. I think the largest one that we gave out for someone starting this year was $2 million. But otherwise, 600,000 is typical. Over $1 million is becoming typical in various fields. And so it's this huge investment you're putting in. And the idea of that cost is you really want the person to be able to hit the ground running, get going in sort of building up their research, which also means working immediately with students and funding those students. So it's really a necessary cost in hiring, and it's the largest cost in hiring. How's my time?
Terrific, thank you very much. Who may be next? Professor Albert?
So I'm Peter Olver. I'm the head of the School of Mathematics. Although we are in the College of Science and Engineering, our startup packages are nowhere close to what the engineers get for their labs. I wanted to give a little demographic view of it, of how common this is and where they're looking for. To give you a context, in mathematics we are 62 regular faculty, of which unfortunately only 6 are female at the moment. As with many STEM fields, it's a big challenge to recruit women. We have 8 assistant professors, 9 associate professors, and 45 full professors, which is to show that in mathematics, professors tend to be promoted quite quickly, and which will play a role in what I want to say. Since I've been department head, which is since 2008, so 11 years now, we've had 17 retention cases. 6 we were successful in retaining, 11 we were unsuccessful. They were divided, 10 of them were male faculty, 7 were female. So one of the messages there, if you compare that to the percentage in the department, is they are coming after the women faculty. Everywhere wants to hire more women, more diversity, underrepresented groups within STEM fields, and that's one of the big targets. At the levels, 6 were assistant professors, 5 associate professors, 6 full professors, but by and large the full professors were in the early stages of the career, so they also come after people in the early stages from assistant to beginning full professor career. 11 of the people of these retention cases were with other U.S. universities, and these range from universities like Duke to Michigan State to the University of Southern California. So there's a range of universities. 3 were foreign universities, and 3 were industry retention. Industry is becoming a more attractive career path for mathematicians than it ever used to be. Karen already said about the salary offers. We've seen offers 50% above the salary that we are willing to make, or more than 50%. We have retained faculty without being able to match the offer, and as Karen said, there's the whole issue of equity within the both the department and the college as a whole, that Minnesota is much more committed to equity than some of our competitors, which are happy to pay giant salaries to some people, not to others, with less than happy results within the faculty. So I think it's important, but it does put us sometimes at a disadvantage in matching these very high offers. Among these, well, just to reiterate that there are costs associated. One of our successful retention, a young female full professor, at the time she was in the process of being promoted to full professor, had a very good offer from Duke because Minnesota was such a good working environment, and the department and the state and the university. We were able to retain her. She subsequently received an $8 million grant from the Simons Foundation and a $2.5 million grant from the National Science Foundation that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't been successful in retaining her. A more recent case that's still not 100% resolved with the University of Pennsylvania, again involving Simons Foundation, is one of our young star faculty in math biology, was lured there to start basically a center with lots and lots of resources. For mathematics, these figures, 8 million and so on, they might be small in the physics and engineering community. They are incredibly large. The other point I make before I stop is that one of the common themes through many of the retention cases and also in our own recruiting is the increasing importance of spousal issues, the so-called two-body problem. And sometimes we have lost people because we have not been able to accommodate the spouse within the university or in industry in the Twin Cities. And similarly, when we're trying to hire people, two-body issues play a very large role in this. And I would say the university could be even more attentive to this issue than it currently is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Associate Dean Blocker.
Thank you so much, Chair Anderson, Regents, and President Gable. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you. I'm going to quote your own words to you. The Regents' policy on diversity emphasizes the importance of a diverse student body, equal educational access, diverse modes and topics of research, scholarship, and artistic activity, and service to the communities in the state and the nation. My argument for you today is that retention is a diversity issue, and it's integral to the achievement of those principles. CLA, by contrast with mathematics, is a leader in some ways in promoting diversity. 22% of our tenure track faculty are faculty of color. 44% of our faculty are women. Among our students, 61% of our freshman class are women, and over 26% are students of color. About a third of all CLA students are the first in their families to attend college. About a fifth are Pell Grant eligible. And about 40% of our students are transfer students, who on the whole are more ethnically and racially diverse, more low to lower middle income, and more first generation than students who come directly from high school. So we are doing well, I would say, in terms of the changing the population and demographics of our students and our faculty. But it's not enough to diversify student, faculty, and staff populations. We also need to ensure their success. The four-year graduation rate for white students in CLA is about 69%. And for American Indian and students of color, it's 60%, a 9-point difference. Four-year graduation rates for first generation students is 7 points lower than for other students. The four-year rate is 9 points lower for Pell eligible students than for other students. The four-year rate, if you're not first generation or Pell eligible, is about 70%. But if you have both of those things, you're a first generation student and you're here on Pell Grants, it's 58%, or a 12-point gap. If we're going to close that gap, we need to be attentive to the diversity of our faculty, and we need to make certain that the faculty reflects these students' identities and their experiences. We really can't tell students that they don't deserve to have the same quality of faculty, researchers, and teachers as private institutions. As my colleague has said, every college and university in the country is conscious of and working toward diversity. This is a goal of every institution across the United States. And that makes diverse faculty extremely valuable on the job market. And if we decide we're not going to pursue retentions, we are, in essence, saying that diversity doesn't really matter. And this is important for us to diversify the academy more broadly, because the students who are currently in our classes will be the faculty of the future. And they need to see people like them who have succeeded at becoming professors at an R1 research university. The final point I'll make is that faculty with diverse identities and from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds are essential to our engagement efforts across the state of Minnesota. Racial and ethnic demographics are changing across the state and in small towns and large cities, and faculty involved in engagement and service activities with communities need to reflect those communities. For engagement to be reciprocal and meaningful, it is essential that we have diverse perspectives and priorities. I will say that in fiscal year 19, the College of Liberal Arts had 15 retention cases. Of those 15, 8 were female and 7 male. 7 faculty were faculty of color and 8 were white. Of those, we retained 9 and lost 6. Among the 6, 4 of them were faculty of color. So this is an increasingly urgent issue in our college.
Thank you. Terrific presentation. Do you have more, Provost Hansen? I think we heard, at least I heard loud and clear that it's best to retain our faculty. It's better all the time, everywhere. But that message came across pretty clear. So with that, I'm going to open it up to my colleagues to ask questions of you and Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. A couple of quick questions on the faculty retention. Is there any area, you might have touched on this, that's more problematic? The arts, the sciences, or the professional schools? Are any of those areas more problematic? And the head of my R&D in my company was on the faculty at Kansas State. And I hired him 2 years ago now, I think, out of there. His main complaint was he spent all his time writing for grants and he couldn't do research. And he spends all his time doing research now, and that was a big deal for him, for leaving. And then the second kind of question that I have is inclusion. It's not, I found in business, it's more about in retaining staff. It's as much about inclusion as it is about money or gender or anything like that. It's about being part of a flat organization, that type of thing. And so I know some of my former colleagues at the veterinary college used to complain about that. They were on the outside looking in on some major decisions. And so I don't know if these are considerations in this process or not. So with that.
Do any of you want to try to answer that?
I'll try to comment on that. First, I'll comment on inclusion, and then I'll try to go back to your first point. So I think that we all know that to retain a faculty member, the faculty member really wants to stay with those colleagues, and therefore the climate and inclusion are very important. And I certainly know in science and engineering, we think that's a very important part of our culture that we're trying to promote. You asked about certain areas that were most vulnerable.
Yeah, what is there one area, sciences, arts, professional schools, are there any area that has more of a problem with retention, or is it across the board?
Provost Hansen.
Chair Anderson and Regent Simonson, I don't think it's so much that there's one area. I think one of the things that we say is particularly vexing is faculty of color. The other thing is that it is the stars in every area who are under intense rating pressure. So it really matters, as we work very hard to build up the quality of every single unit in the university. All of the people who are kind of the rainmakers in those instances are the ones who are very visible and likely to be under offers from other places.
One thing I learned from preparing for this meeting with Provost Hansen was, and I think Professor Longmire, Dean Longmire, you mentioned it, that when we get a faculty member rated, RAIDED, they take their grants and things with them that college is probably counting on to help fund several things. And so it's really, really important that we retain them, because all of a sudden when they go, there's a hole there for the colleges, the different units. And I wasn't aware to the extent that can be such a huge problem. So I think that's important to know. Matter of fact, we actually heard Dean Tolar this morning say he's hoping to bring somebody in who will bring grants and things with him. And that was another point where we're on the good side. Let's hope so, if that works out. But anyway, Regent McMillan, you had a question.
Yeah, there's a question here, but also a couple of, thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters, for lifting the hood, if you will, on this issue and this challenge. It doesn't matter if it's private sector business or public sector or a big public university. The costs of onboarding and then retaining, and the costs of not doing both those things right are immeasurable and crippling if really not done well. So, number one, I'm really glad to see that this is institutional and how you're looking at it, and that you take the time to help us understand it. Number two, I don't know that there's any silver bullets for issues like internal equity. I mean, that exists as much at a utility as it does at an institution like this, or at a bank or wherever. I think common sense is the key, and I'm pleased to hear that you're trying to stick to a principle that, we're not going to blow up internal equity to chase a star or to retain a star. I think that's probably the right way to go, and ultimately that'll serve us well. But I'm sure it's very hard for department heads and deans to sort all that out from time to time. But stay the course would be my thought there. And another issue that's pervasive is what I used to call leading or trailing spouses, and I just became a trailing spouse, so now I don't think of that issue the way I used to. But that's not easy, and if the institution can do something to help with the second spouse or the trailing spouse in an environment like the Twin Cities here especially, that's really a big plus. So I hope we're putting some resources into that. Here's my question. We didn't hear a lot today, and I'm curious just how impactful the benefits side of the equation is apart from salary. Typically when we hear from Vice President Brown at some point, we've historically had a slightly under norm salary level, and this could be P&A, this could be faculty, it could be a lot of things, and a higher than average benefit package. To what extent does good health care, good health care premium numbers, all that, and pension, how does that fit into all this? And if you did talk about it, I wasn't paying attention, but I'm just curious. Historically, that seems to have worked well for us. Is that still a key part of the equation?
Does somebody want to try to answer that question?
Chair Anderson and Regent McMillan, I don't know, perhaps those of you who are on the front lines right now can say this, but I don't think our benefits package right now is as decisive as it may have been in the past. I don't think that's actually helping us. They don't think so either. I mean, ours have been eroded a little, and others are where they are, and I don't think that, I haven't seen that working to retain people.
At least what I hear you saying is in the matrix of all the schools we compete with, ours is nothing special that's going to attract faculty.
I think that's
right.
right.
What you're saying?
Yeah.
I see you nodding.
I could also comment on the spousal or partner issue. We do maintain a fund in my office to work out accommodations in a bridging way. And I think in that respect, this institution is a little bit more favorably placed than some other institutions because we're in a major metro area for the Twin Cities. That's not going to be the case for all of our campuses. But it is something that can work to our advantage because there are other employers in the area. And we do work, both HR works in hand in glove with my office to see about non-academic or other school placements, and we do some bridging if the placement is within the Twin Cities campus. So, or we actually, that fund is usable on any campus.
And I think that trailing spouse is really relative. I come from a small community of Alexandria, and we need engineers, and we need doctors, and we need these people. We'd love to have the Twin Cities problem where there's so many jobs available. You know, sometimes it's just getting the spouse a job. So it is somewhat relative, but I understand what you're competing with too. Regent Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. I'd love to see some more data. I mean, when looking at these slides that have example 1, example 2, example 3, I mean, there's nothing on these slides. And then when you guys talk, you spew out a bunch of data. And a few years ago, I think when we had the faculty staff committee, we tried to wrap our hands around this and tried to get some reports to understand what's going on, not just in your departments, but across the entire university and system. And, you know, I think there are a lot of factors, and it's obvious that faculty of color are in high demand, and they're going to be poached, rated, or whatever by other schools, and it'd be nice to know where they're going, what they're going for. There's also the problem of, you know, having two married people who are both professors, and they need to find a place where they both have positions. Whereas maybe here, one of them has a position and maybe one of them is more junior and coming out of graduate school, and then they try to go and find a place together. And so, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what's happening and where we're losing, where we're winning. But I'm just wondering what it's going to take to actually get some real data on this to define the problem for us.
Provost Hansen.
Chair Anderson and Regent Shu, we can send you that tomorrow. We keep those data about every raid, where we've been successful, where we haven't, school by school. We had taken it that we should give sort of the dimensions of the problem, but we track it. And we give you
That'd be great to. I mean, I haven't seen it the whole time I've been on here. So I think it'd be nice to see it. I mean, I have anecdotal evidence from talking to people on their way out. Some people are leaving because their kids are in California, and so they found a place in California, and they're gone. And another anecdotal example is an engineering professor went to Duke, and you know the question when you go to Duke is, well, how many kids does that person have? Because Duke pays for their education, and they had 6 kids. So surprise, surprise, you know, they took the gig. But I mean, it would be nice to see the data, see how many people were turning over every year, and where we're actually getting people from, whether we're promoting from within or also successful in rating other campuses.
I think your point is well taken, Regent Shu, and I think Provost Hansen will find that data.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Shu, we can send you those data that we keep in my office about offers and retentions and losses. One of the things that may not be there is the thick texture of the kind of negotiations with the department chairs and the dean's offices about how far they want to go in a given case. I mean, in some cases, they may say, well, we just can't do this. It's going to, you know, we're not going to be able to hire in another area if we meet this offer.
Yeah.
So we don't go into that kind of narrative detail in the records we keep centrally, but we do have evidence of the extent to which we're losing faculty.
Well, that would be a good start, but Mr. Chair, I mean, it would be nice to actually get that, you know, to say, hey, look, we maxed out, we made the best offer we could, and this person left because they were getting 50% more. You know, it would just be nice to know that, because I don't know that we really have a problem that everyone else, you know, shares in our system. So,
Well, I'll avow that we do take it seriously as we talk about it with the relevant hiring authorities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Student Representative Garcia had a question.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. Associate Dean Blocker, this question is mostly for you, but if either of your colleagues would like to chime in, please do so. The docket item summary says that for faculty, or for women and faculty of color, some of the factors that most affect their decision whether or not to stay when offered an external offer is a lack of diversity in support structures. Now, we know that improving these structures would bolster both faculty and student retention at the University of Minnesota across the system as a whole. So what steps are we taking in order to improve these structures and make sure that we are retaining these faculty?
Yes, Representative Garcia. Maybe I could ask a point of clarification. When you talk about these structures, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I can talk in general about efforts at the NCLA toward supporting women, faculty, and faculty of color.
Yes, thank you. The docket item summary says these support structures, so any information you would have that would clarify that would be great.
Right, so there are a variety of things that we try to do, starting with hiring, training search committees, faculty committees about implicit bias and thinking critically about how to diversify their faculty. Even before they get to a hire, they might discuss those plans in their 3-year planning documents. Every department in CLA every 3 years creates a new 3-year plan, and we require that they talk about their diversity efforts in their units. That might include hiring or other elements of their programs for students, for faculty, for staff. So you start with a 3-year plan, then you move to a hiring document, and we work with HR to train faculty to think about diversity elements in the act of hiring. Once faculty are here, we try to provide them a number of mentors, whether it's in their own department or in others. And there are faculty groups that have formed from the ground up, essentially, faculty of color who work together in groups to provide mentorship for each other and support. I'm trying to think about any other things that we are trying to do to think about those kinds of things. Certainly when it comes to retentions, this is an issue that we often would raise with any faculty of color or women faculty about why they are seeking a retention elsewhere. And is it simply a matter of money, or is it more a matter of climate, support? It could be problems within their specific unit or something more, something larger. I think the term was used earlier of inclusion. And so it's hard to provide a clear inventory. So we're always looking for inclusivity in department or collegiate committees or in collegiate governance. That kind of thing is a constant concern for us. We want people to see their views and their perspectives reflected everywhere. And I'm certain that we could continue to do more of that throughout the college, but we do have a variety of strategies in place.
Thank you.
We had a good illustration of that this morning when the students asked about more input into the meal plans. It's good just to include people in there. So I appreciate your efforts on that. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is I would characterize this conversation as being the, what was the term, gleeful despair? Cheerful despair, I'm sorry, where because obviously there's the flip side of, well, when are you compelled to retain, when may be better to move along, and that's not as happy of a conversation. One of the things that I'm interested in is what percentage, how much of the risk of losing these top faculty comes from the private sector as opposed to competitive institutions, research institutions like ours. And I may have missed it. I looked for it, but and I know that wasn't necessarily the intent of the presentation. I've always kind of seen the two as being somewhat different, in that when someone is drawn into the private, by a private company, we're not really necessarily on the same playing field, and so it's particularly damaging to the institution, in my view, when we lose somebody who's taking, again, their research funds and their team and heading on to another institution. We lost a world-class political science professor who, while I was an undergraduate, and I remember, and then of course reading this person's work for the next how many years because they were prominent, and there are some situations like that where some locations have advantages to be able to speak to things going on in DC. If it was a political science mind, I think that's important. But I've also tended to see when people are drawn into the private industry that, sometimes I see it as somewhat of a societal utility advancement. I don't get that same sense when they're going from here, where we want to be the best that we can possibly be, to another institution that's doing the same thing. And so can you speak just a little bit to what kind of threat we have in that regard? I don't really have a great sense today. I don't get the sense that the growth in the cost of faculty and what we're providing to faculty has been as much as other expenses that have grown at the university over the number of decades. But in terms of that risk of the private sector, how does that relate to the chances of people being pulled by other institutions of a similar variety? Thank you.
Does somebody want to take a stab at that? It'd be interesting to know in these cases that you called retention cases, all three of you, have any of them been with private companies? That'd be interesting to know for us, I think.
Okay, I would say it's a very small percentage going to private companies. But one area right now is computer scientists can be paid much more than as a faculty member if they go to private industry. So in that area, there is competition. But otherwise, I think it's quite a small number.
In mathematics, we had 3, which is quite a large number for mathematics, and 2 of them were very junior. One went to a hedge fund, one where you can of course make a lot more money, I guess. One went to a data science firm. One was very unique, was a senior faculty whose family owned the largest mining company in Chile, and he basically was forced to take over his father's role as CEO of the company. So that's not a one from which you can generalize at all.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that I don't have the figures on this, but I know that in our departments of economics and statistics, we have a difficult time even hiring people into those positions because they're being, in statistics, Google is constantly wanting these people. So we don't even get a chance to retain them because it's really hard to get to hire them in the first place. So I don't know how many we lose to industry, but those are a couple of departments that are very vulnerable to it in CLA.
Thank you. I think that's Provost Hansen. Do you have something?
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Regent Roche. I think your assessment is exactly right, though. It's in general very few of the proportion who are under rating pressure. It's usually in these fields that we have represented on my closest 2 companions here. And in general, we do regard it as apples and oranges, and in general, we're not trying to match a salary that's coming from industry in cases like that. It's just a different life.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was real interesting. President Gable.
I just have a small follow-up to that. I think more of what you're hearing is our newly minted doctoral students being recruited into industry than our senior faculty being recruited. It happens, of course, but it is there. We are seeing a shift with our newly minted doctoral students at a faster clip than we are with our sitting faculty. It's a different dynamic.
And our senior faculty is going to Chilean mining companies. We got 2 quick questions here from one Regent Beeson, then we'll wrap up with Regent Svagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. It's a great presentation. My takeaway, and I don't need a whole lot more data. I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that retention's an issue. We're managing it as well as we can. It strikes me you're doing everything right. You're being practical, but you're also trying to be fair in terms of internal equity payments. My view on HR and hiring you know all this, but, it's people who spend an inordinate amount of focus on what they're going to get paid. So if they come for money, they're going to leave for money. And that has been my example. The issue about, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to move the Dow on retention, but it strikes me that if we're losing an inordinate number of people of color and women, we ought to be making that up on the hiring side. And if we're not, then that's an issue. So in other words, those same people who are leaving, that same cohort, should be attracted to the university as a place to start their career and to get their resume built. And I would hope we're doing as good of a job on the hiring as we seem to struggle on the retention. Provost, it's not really as a statement as much as a question.
Do you have an answer for that?
Chair Anderson and Regent Beeson, we're certainly trying. I mean, we do recognize that, and we are certainly trying. We're involved in a variety of pipeline programs to bring postdocs here so that they will find out what it's like to live here and then possibly be hired onto the faculty, in addition to the sort of standard recruitment procedures that the departments themselves go through. So it is an issue. I mean, I also do want to say, as we talk about this and our conflicting emotions, we're also trying to raid from other places too. So,
Thank you. We're going to finish with Regent Swigum here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick because Regent Beeson actually took my question. I was going to ask about our efforts to go out and recruit people of high performance. So let me change it just a little bit because I've got the microphone. Change it and maybe be devil's advocate just a bit, if I could, Provost. I believe very strongly we got to retain our performing faculty, our high performing. I've been in a few occupations in my life. I was a high school teacher. There were some colleagues of mine I wouldn't want my students to be in their class. I was a farmer. Some farmers are not good farmers. And in the legislature, believe it or not, there are some duds. There are some persons over there, you wonder ever how they got elected. Ever. Out of 4,500 faculty, or how many faculty we have, I just assume that there might be one or two or a handful or some that we want to get recruited. We want to have some other place taken. What do we do to address that end of the side? Is there something we can do to help Purdue recruit somebody who we don't want anymore or shouldn't have? Or how do we get rid of that handful of persons that maybe are not high performing?
Provost Hansen will ask for an answer, but we'll ask you to be careful.
Chair Anderson and Regent Swigum, I will be. We depend on a system of trust among universities. We do not try to get rid of faculty who are underperforming. What we try to do is get their performance level up. We have a variety of mechanisms of remediation, and we put people on performance improvement plans, essentially. And if people don't improve, we do have other remedies, but it's usually not trying to fob them off on Wisconsin. That's not going to work.
Good answer, and probably one, Provost, that I would expect. But I know life too, and I know that in life, we're not all high performers in our area.
Right. Those aren't the ones
you know
under
that as well.
Yeah, they aren't under rating pressure.
Well, this has been, from my point of view, a tremendous discussion, and I think it's good for this board to see some of the trials and tribulations that you people have doing what you're doing every day, and we appreciate you for that. Mr. Langworthy says we can take about a 7-minute break, and then we will be back here for the second half. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Karen. That's a good deal, just because I set my stuff down. Time timer. Welcome back. Let everybody sit down here. We have Regent McMillan making his way up to the horseshoe. We'll give him a second. Our next presentation, our third out of 4 today, is going to be the college and the schools and PSEO strategy. Again, this is a discussion information item. There's no vote or anything today. I think our presenters are going to be interim Dean Bob Stein and Vice Chancellor Hoffman, all the way from Crookston. So, gentlemen, when you are ready, we are ready for you. Are you going to start, Karen?
No, they can start.
Your name's not on my instruction list.
Well, I can say this, Bob and, John is Vice Chancellor of Academic Student Affairs, and Bob is the interim dean of the College of Continuing and Professional Studies on the Twin Cities campus, and they're going to give a quick history and overview of these programs at the university. They're prepared to provide a general system-wide picture of these programs, but the Crookston and Twin Cities campuses will be used as 2 main examples to illustrate some of the factors that shape the PSEO and college and the schools. So I think Vice Chancellor Hoffman is going to start.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Chair Anderson, member of the board, students. As noted in the docket materials, the history of higher education institutions looking to high schools to help with the first 2 years of coursework extends back to the early days of the land grant movement. One of the early innovations that came out of that movement was the community college, originally grades 13 and 14. And that is an institution that certainly has served us well in terms of expanding educational access to higher education. Several decades ago, we again looked to high schools through the dual enrollment program, an opportunity for students to take advanced coursework during high school, courses that would meet high school requirements and also help them to earn college credit. The results of these efforts are promising, though some of the results are mixed. In terms of access, the reality has been that most of the students who have taken advantage of these programs have come from rather well-to-do families, thus not extending access in the ways that had hoped. However, in terms of reducing the cost and the time to degree, the programs have had great success and continue to be popular. With that, I will hand things over to Dr. Stein to talk about the system and the Twin Cities campus.
Great, thank you, John. Regent Anderson and members of the board, thank you for allowing us to come here and talk about colleges and schools and PSEO. John gave this brief history, it goes way, way back in time. Our plan today is to sort of do an overview of these programs at the state level, look at it within the system and give you a couple examples from campuses and recognize that this looks somewhat similar across campuses, but also there are some differences as well. So you're going to get 2 out of 4 or 5 examples. So first of all, I'll just start with dual enrollment. Allows high school students to earn both high school and college credits at the same time. It gives them access to a variety of classes, more than they would have in their high schools, and also the challenging coursework that they may not get in their high schools. In Minnesota, it's set up that tuition fees and required textbooks are free to students and their families, but I just remind you there is a cost to all of those, borne either by the state, by the high school, or by the institution that's offering the program. Concurrent enrollment, what we call college in the schools, or some variation of that in the University of Minnesota system, is the program where students are taking college-level courses in their high schools, typically taught by high school teachers. These are partnerships between the institutions and the high schools, so it works very well that way. Post-secondary enrollment option, PSEO as we always call it, that's where students actually come to campus, are taking classes here, and either full-time or part-time. If you look across the state, and the Minnesota Department of Education classifies these as rigorous course taking, You can see here concurrent enrollment, what we call colleges and schools, almost 20,000 students doing that. It's a third of all the high school students in the state doing that. Advanced placement, AP, you've heard of that. Another almost 1/3 of the students, another 19,000. See smaller numbers for PSEO and the International Baccalaureate Program. And I don't have it in here, but I think it's in your document material. Many students will do multiples of these. Some do just one, but they do 2, 3. Some students even do all 4 of these simultaneously. Well over half of all high school students in Minnesota are participating in one of these programs. And if we look at all the higher education institutions in the state, you can see 63 do PSEO. It's actually required that universities offer this and that high schools offer it to their students. Concurrent enrollment is not required. That's a choice by both high schools and institutions. And there are a variety of reasons. The number is much smaller there. It can be more challenging. The state requires that institutions be accredited by a national body to do that, and the Higher Learning Commission also has requirements for teachers who teach college and schools, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Here's what the system looks like. And you can see about 12,000 CIS students altogether in the University of Minnesota system and about 740 PSEO students. These are sort of rough averages from year to year, but all told about 13,000 students participating in one, in some cases, both of these programs. So we are already serving a lot of students across the state. For colleges and the schools, just in general, and this is, again, generally true across the system, it's high schools and high school instructors who are delivering the courses to students in their high schools. Our departmental faculty are involved in interviewing and selecting those high school teachers, and then they also provide the ongoing professional development for those teachers as well. And then on each campus, there's a CIS office that administers the programs, keeps track of all the students, does registration, keeps track of the teachers, their qualifications. So those are sort of the 3 main players in college and schools. Here's just a quick snapshot of the Twin Cities, 10,000 total students every year. And as a reminder, that's half of all the concurrent enrollment students in the entire state. 30% of all high schools participate, offer at least one of our courses. You see more than 400 students, 26% students of color. It's a big program. Just as a perspective, half again larger than the incoming freshman class on the Twin Cities campus. Students gain a lot of benefits from college and the schools. Again, they gain that access to the rigorous coursework without leaving their high school. We talk about they gain academic momentum, so they've earned some college credit, helps them as they get on to school. And we have also started some programs, what we call our entry point CIS. It's accessible to students in the academic middle, so roughly the 50th to the 20th percentile in their class rank, and we think that that opens it up to far more students to give them that experience. For the high school instructors, they learn from the university faculty, they deepen their understanding of their discipline, they receive this professional development, and the huge benefit there is that they use what they learn not only in the CIS course they teach, but in every other course they teach, and then they share that with their colleagues in their high schools. So there's a huge multiplier effect of the CIS program across the high schools where we are. And then the faculty and departments on campus, it provides an outreach opportunity for them to communities and schools. Several of them view it as a potential recruiting tool for students into their majors. We actually do have some departments that view this as competition for students in their entry-level courses. Here's just a quick map. This is where the CIS schools are located that the Twin Cities campus serves. Clearly concentration in the metro area, but you can see we reach out across the state. If you put the whole system together, this is what it looks like. And so we cover vast swaths of the state, and all those counties that are in white there, I will remind you there are 18 other institutions that are doing college and the school-like programs. So I don't know this for sure. My guess is every county in the state has at least one high school, probably more, that's served by some institution in Minnesota with a college and the schools program. Lots of factors affect how large any given college and the schools program is. I mentioned before the HLC instructor requirements. Their requirements are a master's degree in the field that they are teaching, a master's degree plus 18 credits in that field, or a combination of education and then what they call tested experience. So that does limit the number of high school teachers that are actually qualified to teach. The academic departments on campus also have some limitations. They need both interested and available faculty to be what we call faculty coordinators, the one who select the teachers, provide the professional development. And we have some departments that are very active in CIS, but simply cannot offer more sections because they do not have the capacity to do that. We have other departments interested in doing it, but can't because they don't have faculty who have the capacity to take that on. There's also clearly competition with AP courses and IB. If you notice, if you remember, it's the same number of students are taking AP courses as do college in the schools. That's another good option. High school principals and superintendents tend to love college in the schools because it keeps their students in their classroom, but there is a financial impact on them. They don't get the same reimbursement from the state that they pay us for the program, so that can be a limitation. And then just simply our infrastructure to handle the number of students that we have. So what's next for us? We want to continue improving student equity and access, particularly like with these entry point courses and some other courses we would like to offer. We continue to look at addressing this teacher credentialing and preparation. And then finally, we are trying to make sure we align our resources to allow for what I call strategic incremental growth. And to do that, we need, again, the qualified high school instructors, the faculty coordinators out of the departments, and capacity for us to handle all these registrations, students, and those kind of things. Quickly going to go to PSEO, talk about that. On our campus, we have about 600 students every year. Usually about 400 of them are new students. About 200 are returning, so they started as a PSEO student in their junior year in high school and are coming back for more. And I would say we admit for success. So we look for students who are qualified, but we want to make sure they have a positive experience here because we know that leads to matriculation at the university. And one limitation about PSEO is, at least on this campus, we do not offer student housing to them, so they need to be within commuting distance of this campus to participate. Many of the same benefits that I described for CIS, sort of with one exception, is students in PSEO actually are on campus, and so they are able to sort of access the campus community and many of the things that go on here as well. And that last note, the positively impacts graduation rates, I'll show you here. This is a snapshot, again, for last academic year on the Twin Cities campus, so again, about 600 students. I'll just point out the 40% students of color there in that class. 54% of those students enrolled as University of Minnesota Twin Cities freshmen. And if you look at the graduation rates there, that 81% on 4 years, so there's a positive impact for it. And these are students who participated in PSEO here and then came to school here. So some pretty large benefits there. Again, there are factors that affect the size of PSEO. There are limited seats available for these students. All these students, whether they're in college and schools or PSEO, need to also be completing their high school graduation requirements. And so there's a fairly limited number of courses that they can take that do that and then also allow them to earn credit here. And we have shortage of seats in almost all the STEM fields in English and American government. And a lot of that is these students register after all other students. We want to make sure there's room for all our incoming freshmen to take these classes, and so that's why our PSEO students register last. So that also has a limiting factor on the size. High schools are concerned about the loss of state aid. When students participate in PSEO, part of their state financial aid comes to us rather than to the high school. And they're also concerned about the absence of these high-achieving students out of the classrooms, their hallways, those kind of things. And then again, finally, just in terms of the size of that we have is availability of those student support services. Quickly, what's ahead for us? Again, we're focusing on success of these students. We're going to put more effort into orientation and, like in many places, in mental health and wellness. We want to emphasize major and career preparation and also continue to work on that matriculation rate into the University of Minnesota system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John and let him talk about Crookston.
So some of the aspects of these programs look a little bit different at the greater Minnesota campuses, and Crookston is a unique case study. We have approximately 900 college in the school students. That is a third of our head count. When you look at our head count as 2,800 degree-seeking students at 1,800. Of these students, about 7% are students of color. That compares to 21% for our incoming class of on-campus students this year. Looking at Duluth, I've got some numbers here. Their numbers are approximately the same, a little bit larger, over 900 students, 8% students of color. Morris's program is quite small with 32 students, and Rochester does not engage in the College and the Schools program. It's important to note that these programs are to be revenue neutral, and so the $225,000 that we bring in revenues go to cover the costs of the program for us as a campus. And as Dr. Stein noted, one of the key challenges is the requirements for the teachers, especially in the rural communities. Many of our high school teachers, when they pursue a master's degree, they do so in education rather than in chemistry or mathematics or history. And so they need those additional 18 graduate credits to be qualified. As we look at the PSEO program, we have served over the past 5 years an average of 23 students. This year we're at 32. About a third of those students participate in the program online for us. For this group, again, 7% of the students over that period have been students of color. That is an interesting gap, as our largest feeder is Crookston High School. Crookston High School is 32% students of color, 22% Latinx students. So there is a gap for us to address there. At Duluth, they have 80 students this year. About half of those students are full-time, 8% students of color. Morris uses a related program, Courses According to Agreement, and they have 27 students. There's 5 students at the Rochester campus. One of the challenges for the PSEO program is it is not revenue neutral. We receive approximately half the tuition per credit from these students as we do for our degree-seeking students. Additionally, as we see a larger proportion of students coming to us with large numbers of credits under their belt, they move more quickly through their general education courses that typically have higher student-to-faculty ratios, and into our major courses where the ratios are small. So over the past several years, our student-to-faculty ratio in our 1,000 and 2,000 level courses has dropped to just over 20. And so that does have additional budget implications for us as an institution. I think 2 pieces on this slide that I'd like to point out. The first one is fairly obvious as you compare the college and the schools to the PSEO students. You look at Crookston near the top. Not surprisingly, when students come and spend time on our campus as a PSEO student, they're much more likely to come to the University of Minnesota Crookston. That's a very good thing. Perhaps more surprisingly, when you look at that second maroon line, when students come to spend time on our campus, they are nearly 2.5 more times likely to attend any of the University of Minnesota system campuses as compared to the students who complete college in the schools courses. At the University of Minnesota Duluth, 42% of their graduates end up within the University of Minnesota system. At Morris, it's a third of their PSEO students. So as we look at some future directions, I think there's some opportunities for us at the University of Minnesota Crookston. In past years, oftentimes our college and the school students did not know that they were Golden Eagles. So we are working on changing that, sending them a letter to notify them that they are our students, and providing them some guidance on the college search process. We have to be careful, given some of the guidelines from the state, about our recruitment efforts, but as is the case with the rest of our recruitment, helping students to make great decisions about where to go to college will result in a number of students coming to our campus. And so we're working on that, as well as with some professional development with the teachers in those programs. For the PSEO program, I think there's some great opportunities for us to work more closely with Crookston High School, with a couple other schools in the area, to change the review process to indicate to students, in particular students of color, first-generation college students, low-income students, that this is a program for them. As was shared in the previous session, it's helpful for students to see themselves reflected in the faculty and the staff. It's also helpful for them to see themselves reflected in the application and in those materials and in the way that we make our decisions. And so we're engaging in with the high schools in revising those criteria, the holistic criteria, to try to attract more students to campus. We believe that in so doing, those are also students that the data tell us they are more likely to stay within 50 miles of their home when choosing where to go to college. That is good news for us as a campus because we see them coming to us. In closing, one of the things I'd like to say in terms of access, and then we'll open this up for question, both of these programs are intended to increase access to higher education. It's a part of our land grant mission. In the context of the decreasing state allocations, we talked about this morning, and the University of Minnesota Crookston is highly tuition dependent. We want to ensure that these programs are not just going to students from well-to-do families, that they are coming to our campuses and working their way through lowering their costs, but perhaps having negative impact on the revenues that we have as an institution. And those revenues, we use them to provide services and programs to the rest of our students, a distinctively high proportion of whom are first-generation college students, low-income students from rural communities. We need to provide those services to those students to ensure that they are graduating on time and thus keeping their debt and cost of education low and enhancing education, the access to education for those students, among others. So with that, we thank you for listening, and we will entertain your questions.
Terrific. Good program. Do we have anybody lined up that wants to start with questions? Wow. You guys are Regent Beeson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, presenters. I was going to ask both presenters, but I thought about it when Dr. Stein was speaking. That is, if we have, let's say, 500 students on campus with PSEO and 40% of whom are students of color, but we're only, matriculating 25% in our overall class, what efforts are we making to try to recruit those students? I mean, they're a captive audience. Are there limitations on recruiting of those PSEO students on campus, or do you turn those names over to admissions, or do you not have anything to do with their ultimate recruitment?
Regent Beeson, Chair Anderson, I'm not involved in recruitment of the freshman class, but I can almost guarantee you that every one of those students who is in our PSEO program is already on the list for the University of Minnesota to be recruited here. Typically for our PSEO students, they're in the top 10, 15% of their classes, and so they would already be recruited by the university. I mentioned before about our desire to advise them, and we have advisors who work with these students, really advise them into success as they are here as students. And part of that, in some cases, it's actually convincing them to not be quite as aggressive in the courses they take as they want, because they can get buried, and this does end up on their transcript. And so we work with them very carefully about the courses that they take. So I wouldn't call that direct recruiting, but again, we try to recruit them for success here, because that does lead to matriculation.
Follow-up, thank you.
Go ahead, Regent.
Chair Anderson. I would be interested to know if I'm talking about special recruiting for an audience that is proven, is on campus, who's demonstrated sort of affinity to the university by virtue of the fact they could have gone other places, and what efforts we're making, special efforts, not normal efforts, not just getting those names, making sure they're in the pipeline of communications, but an actual campaign, because that's a strong cohort of young people.
Any more answers, Dean Stein?
Regent Beeson, Chair Anderson, I don't have a specific answer for you. That's certainly something we can look into and find out what the admissions office is doing.
Thank you. Student Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. First of all, I'd like to just say that as a former student of both PSEO and CIS, they are outstanding programs that have allowed me personally to go further in my own degree currently than I would have without them. And though I didn't actually do them at the University of Minnesota, the ability to transfer those credits to the university is something that was extremely important to me when I was making my decision of where I was going to go to college. That being said, I'm seeing that on this chart that you showed us, it says that 33% of students who do CIS at Crookston end up going to the Minnesota State system. Is there any reason why that's happening in particular? And is that a phenomenon that's happening across different campuses as well?
Chair Anderson and Student Garcia, thank you for the question. I do not have a good answer for that question. As noted previously, we have done too little historically to reach out to those college and the schools students in terms of recruitment, which addresses Regent Beeson's question as well. We are changing that as a part of our overhaul for the system that we are doing in terms of those students. I would note as context, one of the pieces that occurs with a PSEO student is that they have direct access to our faculty through their classes. Thus, they're taking courses with faculty who are engaging in research, who are leading scholars in their field. That clearly enhances the quality of those experiences and has an influence on the students as they're making their decisions about where to go to college. That's not to say anything against the high school teachers who are exceptional, who are teaching the classes in the high school, but they are not engaging in the type of scholarship that our faculty are on our campuses.
Thank you.
Vice Chancellor Hoffman, and the question was about college and the schools, is it not, Student Representative Garcia?
Yes.
So, I live out in that area, and I'll just tell you my take on that is that it's a financial tool for many of these students. Maybe that's what it was for you. I don't know. But so many of those students that take college in the schools, in my opinion, they are looking at the Moorhead states, the St. Cloud states, the Bemidji states, the North Dakotas. It's less expensive. So I think that is part of the reason, Crookston, if you can get them there for PSEO, you'll probably capture them. But the ones that are college in the schools, it's a wider variety of student. Is that a fair statement?
Chair Anderson, I think that is a fair statement. I would note that, again, part of our work is in messaging. The cost of the University of Minnesota Crookston is competitive. Our students we're leading the system in 3-year graduation rates with 10% overall of our students finishing in 3 years. We do well in 4 years. The cost where the loans really come into play in terms of the cost of education is in year 5 and 6. Some of the scholarships time out at that point, savings, et cetera. We are a competitive option, and we just need to do a better job of communicating that, and I appreciate the help that you have provided in that, as well as other members of the board.
Thank you. Regent Davenport.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you for the presentation. 2 points or questions. One, there are some legislative limits on how you can market, and are you feeling that at the local level? And maybe, I know there's been some efforts from the higher ed community to alleviate some of that pain, but do you feel that? And then second, you mentioned the Higher Learning Commission, the accrediting body HLC, and their new requirements to require not just a master's, but the 18 credits in field. And is that a barrier? Are you finding yourself being able to offer education courses to help those high school teachers get there?
Answer.
Chair Anderson and Regent Davenport, again, excellent questions. In terms of the state pressures in recruitment, yes, I think there are ways to navigate that, and these are conversations we've engaged in. Again, for us to reach out to students and talk with them about making great choices about how they make the decision to go to college is something that is completely within the purview of our work. It is also the central goal of our admissions counselors Sometimes our admissions counselors help students go to other institutions, and we should see that as a success. And if we focus on what's right by the student, I think we will ultimately see what is right by our campuses. So that is the approach that we are taking in terms of the recruitment side of things. As for the HLC, it is a challenge. I think it's one that's important for us to wrestle with. These credits come from the University of Minnesota, and so it is important that there is a quality that is associated with those credits. To start with, again, as noted, these are not courses delivered by our faculty who are exceptional. So our faculty are working as mentors with the teachers in the schools. I think it's an appropriate request that they have 18 credits in the area where they're teaching. That is a challenge in rural communities. It is perhaps an opportunity for us as a system to think about some delivery modalities to where we may be able to equip high school teachers with those credits so that they can become qualified to teach the college and the school's courses.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Regent Kenyana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for the presentation. I have a brief question, and then I'll get into the other one. First one I think is for Dean Stein. You mentioned for PSEO, because there's no housing, the students are expected to or have to live in a commuting distance. Does this imply then that they're not eligible for online courses?
Regent Kenyana and Chair Anderson, the Twin Cities campus, and I need to check with my colleague back here who does this, we offer maybe one online course? We offer several online courses on this campus. So they are eligible to do that. And I think that would be true for any online PSEO course, for any high school students, so they can do that. But that's a small portion of students who do that.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. So my next question is about the student experience of PSEO students. Someone mentioned that they're usually in their top 15% of their class. As a former PSEO student, I can dispel that misconception. Some of us slipped through the cracks. But drawing on my experience as a PSEO student, I see on slide 16, what's next for PSEO, one of the things is mental health and wellness. And I remember, we know that these students besides me, most of them do well academically and they're qualified and they succeed in those classes. But there's a kind of in-betweenness, right? I did full-time, so I remember I didn't feel like I was part of my high school, but I was also not fully at this college, or whether it's the social aspects of it, or I got to my high school picture day on accident because I was on campus to talk to my counselor and it just happened to be picture day, so I just wasn't part of that experience. And at the same time, maybe you're not fully part of this collegiate experience. Do we see any of that, or how is that accounted for, or what kind of support do we have for those students that are kind of in between these two worlds?
Do either of you have an answer for that college experience?
Go ahead if you want, then I'll.
Go ahead.
All right, Regent Kenyana and Chair Anderson. I think we have the benefit, of having a large enough program. We actually have a PSEO student group, and so they can find community with themselves, and one of our advisors works with that group of students. So that, and I expect even with that, they do feel a little bit of, I'm not quite there and I'm not quite here, and particularly for part-time students, that may be more the case as well. But we do, that's one of the supports that we try to provide for them. And again, we're wanting to spend more time in orientation with them to help them think through that aspect of their lives and how they deal with that. And an issue which I think we have resolved now, when the Twin Cities campus started doing the Welcome Week programs, we had a number of PSEO students who said, well, I've been here for a year, maybe 2 years, I know all this stuff. And we said, no, you don't really know all this stuff. You need to go through that just like all the other incoming freshmen, and we've been able to figure that out. And I think that's part of the learning process for them as well, in terms of how, sort of how they fit on this campus, not only as a PSEO student, but when they arrive here.
Thank you.
Chair Anderson and Regent Kenyana.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would add two quick thoughts. First, this is a dicey aspect of the program. There are laws that compel us to reach out to parents when there's concerns, and there are laws that prevent us from reaching out to parents when there are concerns for students who are under the age 18. The courts have not addressed that tension, and I just assume they not do so with the University of Minnesota case. So there's judgments to be made when we're working with these students. Likewise, similar types of programs. We have an orientation experience for all of our PSEO students as they come to campus that includes information about our health and wellness and mental health programs. I think we also benefit from a small scale that helps us in working with students who have concerns oftentimes that emerge in the late teens at the very time that they are coming to our campus. So it's a great and important question.
Thank you.
Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you for the presentation. It's a great program. I remember having a discussion with our former Commissioner of Education, and I said, hey, we already have free college. 2 years worth. It's called PSEO. And it's kind of funny because he kind of looked at me in a funny way because there aren't enough kids really taking advantage of it. I mean, it is free to the student because it's covered by the local school district. And local school districts don't like it because they don't collect the same amount of per student funding from those students who are engaged in this. And I'm sure we don't like it because we're only getting paid a fraction of the dollars per credit. And I'm not sure kind of where this whole thing came from, but the students that I know from my kids' high school who were participants in PSEO, I mean, it is a different high school experience, especially if you go PSEO as a junior and senior. You kind of miss out on your last 2 years of high school. But on the flip side, you end up potentially accruing quite a few number of credits that can help reduce your cost of college. So I think it's a great program. I do have one question about transferability. I think this is a Minnesota program, right? So can you take credits out of state on this? And then also if you take credits at like MnSCU, can you, I mean, maybe this is back to the other presentation about transferring credits and stuff, but how transferable are those credits?
I'll take a crack at that. Regent Chu, Chair Anderson, our experience, I don't know if I can give you exact numbers, but something more than 90% of the PSEO credits that our students earn can be used. Clearly, if they matriculate here, they are University of Minnesota courses, they automatically count because they're in the classroom with everybody else. They typically transfer to other universities as well, sometimes not for the specific course, but they can count the credit toward their 120 credits. I think the one exception is many, if not all, of the Ivy League schools will not accept any of these credits from anybody, even us. But the reports we get back from students is that between 90 and 95% of the credits that they earn here count. I think the answer to your question on, if they've done PSEO at a Minnesota State school or one of the private schools or, school out of state, because many states have very similar programs, it probably does go back to the last presentation that if we can find the equivalency of that course, it would most likely count here. Just like we do with students who have been of college age or out of high school and are taking a course, we would look at those as well. But typically, I think they would count.
Thank you. Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate that. That is kind of interesting. So a student really does have to kind of plan out where they're going to do their PSEO, and a lot of metro area students would come here and end up trying to get enrolled here eventually as a freshman, or actually they come in as sophomores or whatever. One other question about, or not a question, just a comment about the last time we were in Rochester, I remember meeting a student who had actually moved to Rochester just to get into PSEO in Rochester and get started in college while she was still supposedly in high school. So I think it's a great program, and certain people figure out how to use it. And the only problem is you don't have the normal high school experience, but the kids who are really focused will kind of give up on that, and they'll take the free college. Thank you.
Mayor.
I think my question got answered by the previous questions. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. And Student Representative El Zahidi.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I really want to echo on Regent Shu's comments. I did PSEO as well when I was in high school, and I don't regret doing it. Of course, it was a difficult decision to stay away from the high school activities and leaving my friends, but it also has allowed me to plan an internship to study abroad in the next semester. And so I think that it was well worth my time. My question was, what can current grad students with a master's degree in the field do to facilitate more CIS programs?
Let's see, I need a clarification on your question. Can you repeat it?
Yes. What can current graduate students with a master's degree in the field do to facilitate more CIS programs?
I think is the question getting at how they can get to be teaching them?
Yes.
How they can, and I think the answer is at 18 credits. I mean, that's where she's going, I think.
Yeah, so Student Representative Al Zahidi and Chair Anderson, if I understand your question correctly, so for college in the schools, for a teacher to qualify to teach, they have to be approved by whichever campus is doing it. And again, I laid out the requirements that the Higher Learning Commission has there. So and sort of one of three ways they can qualify. And so it's, at least in our program, our college and school staff works very closely with those high schools and those teachers to determine whether they're qualified or not. And if they fall short in one of those places, we work with them it's like, do you need more credits? There's this tested experience we can use as well. And so we help teachers figure that part of it out, how they're able to do that. In terms of, so if that's your question, that's the answer. If your question is, how do we get more CIS going out in high schools? Is that your question? Or is it more about the individual teacher?
The individual teacher.
Okay.
Thank you. You know, I'll just, we're done with questions here and we're going to move on. But I'll just tell you, I'm a huge backer of especially the college and the schools program coming from rural Minnesota. We have a high school, we have a technical college in our town. And PSEO is great, absolutely great. But what it does, it takes kids out of their high school, like Regent Shu talked about, I think Regent Kenyatta talked about, and they go to the tech college or the school. They lose a little of the high school experience. From the high school's perspective, they lose the revenue for that student, and they lose their high achievers. The student loses the ability to participate in band and maybe some other things if the schedules don't work out. For college in the schools, if we can get the dual credits taught in the high schools, the money flows to the high school. The high school then pays the college, and it's much more, Regent Sviggum can probably tell us this, but it's much more amenable to rural legislators, is it not? Because the high schools are their largest employers in many of their communities. Is that a fair statement? Fair. So anyway, I'm a big backer of it. Both of my boys got college in the schools, got about almost a year of credit before they went to college, and got it through their high school, and it was just terrific. So thank you. Great program. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing. We're ready to move on with campus climate. And we're going to welcome our friend Vice President Go, Associate Vice Provost Moline, and Assistant Vice President Jafar? Ja. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Go, you've been sitting over there since like 9 this morning. Still awake?
I am, just as you are, I hope. Okay.
Heard that, Steve?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues, Dr. Leanne Malin, Associate Vice Provost for Student Success in the Office for Undergraduate Education, and Dr. Amina Jaffer, we're Assistant Vice President with the Office for Equity and Diversity, to speak with you about the important topic of campus climate. As you're all very aware, campus climate has received a lot of attention in the past few years as we work as a university system to ensure that all students, faculty, and staff have the best experiences possible across our 5 campuses. Having mentioned faculty, student, and staff, I want to make clear 2 points that are, I think, important here. One is campus climate is a topic that any of us should be able to address. And for that reason, I'm glad that the Office for Undergraduate Education is partnering with us. Office for Student Affairs could also be presenting. Deans, campus leaders across our system, Provost's office as representing the academic affairs and the faculty side of it. The second point I want to make before we continue is the sense of systemness that I think we've emphasized both in President Gable's vision. But for this presentation, I understand that the board was focusing on SERU data, the Student Engagement of Research University data, that currently focuses only on the Twin Cities campus. So for that reason, I wanted to explain the parameters of limiting it to the Twin Cities data at the moment, because only spring 2020 is when all the other system campuses will be participating in the SERU. Just for your information as well, there is a graduate SERU, graduate version of this survey that was not within the parameters of today's presentation. To begin, I would like us to spend some time defining campus climate, because it's my understanding that we have never done that in a board presentation yet, including the challenges associated with how we assess the actual and the perceived experiences of what are large groups of diverse students, faculty, and staff. My colleagues will then provide an overview of the 2019 quantitative and qualitative SERU data. The qualitative SERU data has not been analyzed before, and we have chosen to take a deep dive into this data to better understand how students believe we can work together to improve campus climate. As we present the data, we will also highlight our current and future efforts to address issues of climate. So what is campus climate? It typically refers to a few areas, as you can see in your docket, including the experiences of individuals and groups on campus, and importantly, the quality and the extent of the interactions between those groups of individuals. As we have seen on our campuses, having a diversity of views and experiences is only one component of climate. How we interact with one another, or what we call interactional diversity, greatly impacts how we perceive the health of our overall environment. One of the most crucial pieces of climate is respect. We know from research on campus climate that feeling valued and respected is the foundation for how we understand our experiences. I also want to highlight some of the ingredients of a welcoming climate, as you can see in the window on the right side of your PowerPoint presentation: a sense of belonging and a sense of autonomy. Not only do we want to have spaces where we can reach our highest potential, but we also want those spaces, in the word autonomy, to be in those spaces without having to hide or minimize our identities, views, or experiences. These are 2 separate but related factors that underlie much of what we think of in terms of students feeling valued and respected on campus. In the third slide for this presentation, we're focusing on the student experience, specifically using data generated from the SERU survey. Although we will not be discussing the many evaluative tools listed here, we felt it was important to acknowledge that there are many different aspects of climate, perhaps not always captured in the SERU data specifically. The term campus climate is somewhat misleading because it implies that climate is one large category that's easily understood and assessed. In reality, there are many components and areas that contribute to the overall climate. These can include how specific groups are doing on campus, the accessibility of support, services, and resources, the presence of negative activity that's targeted towards a particular group, and so on. And for that reason, we've listed other surveys, we've listed other sources of campus climate information for you on this slide. We have many ways of assessing the health of our campuses. Some focus on positive activity and experiences, and some aimed at quantifying the negative experiences of individuals and groups. Both positively oriented and negatively oriented data are important in understanding and assessing campus climate. We've also listed assessments aimed at staff and faculty beyond students, because we know that if staff and faculty are not doing well, this impacts our students. So for example, one of the bullets is about the student rating of teaching, which highlights the important role faculty play in leading classroom climate. So as you can see from this list, assessing climate is complicated and involves evaluating many, many factors. Our campus climate is also impacted by broader social and political events. Many of these experiences we have on this campus mirror issues and events that are happening locally, nationally, and internationally, and many times not within our control. It is no surprise that when national events occur, students tend to report these events as impacting their sense of climate. This is also the case for events that happen on our campuses. If I may illustrate, there's an event happening in downtown Minneapolis right now, even as we speak, that I can guarantee you is impacting climate. On either side of, or on any part of the continuum you may be residing, it is impacting climate, and probably not an accurate time to try and survey climate today. As I mentioned before, we are focusing on qualitative and quantitative SARU data for this presentation, which specifically analyzed data utilizing 4 questions that get to the core of campus climate. These are in the 4 yellow boxes. These include, I feel valued as an individual at this institution. I feel that I belong at the University of Minnesota. Students of my fill-in-the-blank category, identity category, are respected on this campus. And for the qualitative question on the right-hand side, if the university could do one thing to improve campus climate, what would it be? Knowing that campus climate requires having an in-depth understanding of the actual and perceived experiences of many people, we chose questions that highlight students' experiences as well as their perceptions about how others like them are treated on campus. Now my colleague, Dr. Leanne Malin, will discuss the SARU quantitative data.
Thank you. So you can see here we highlighted 2 of the SARU questions that we are speaking to in regards to the actual experiences that students have, the feelings of belonging and feeling valued. So these are the overall averages of our students presented over time, as well as comparison to our AAU colleagues or peer institutions. As noted earlier, the 2019 data is not yet available. So the good news as you look at this overall is that the University of Minnesota Twin Cities is on par with our peers. I think the bad news is that overall we're not doing a great job in higher education on other campuses. So when we look at the 60s and 40% as our rates, that's a little disappointing. I think there's some work to be done in those areas. But we also know that reporting this data at this level isn't always very helpful. So there's a lot of rich data within that as we disaggregate the information here. In your packets, you saw a lot of that disaggregated data, and we wanted to make sure that you had hopefully had some time to look at that more intently. And even I think as you look at the information that's in your packet, you hopefully noted that in comparison to our AAU peers, we as well are doing well, if not better than some of our peers. So that data overall is looking, I think kind of reflects the national climate that we're all dealing with in terms of these topics. If we look at the next question, the students of my similar identity are respected. So we find that the U fares, again, slightly better than our AAU peers. But again, we look at the breakdown of student responses within these categories, and we find a range of experiences. So for example, what I'm pulling out from at least the docket materials that you have, and if we look at race and ethnicity, we'll see that 58% there's a 58% gap between our black students and our white students and how they report this answer. If we look at social class, we see a gap of 46% between low income and upper middle class students. And if we look at political orientation, we see a 75% gap between very conservative and liberal students. So I pulled out those extreme gaps that we have, but really that's what the areas that in working on the nuances of this climate and how we work to address it, we need to be looking at looking at that to better understand and address these gaps.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, for the remainder of the presentation, we will be presenting the SERU qualitative data, as well as providing an overview of the efforts that we currently have and our future efforts to improve campus climate. Asking students directly if the university could do one thing to improve campus climate, what would it be, gave us access to information that we didn't have before, and it complements what we know from the quantitative data. While the quantitative data can give us a general sense on a lot of very important issues, this types of information lets us hear directly from the students in their own words for the types of experiences that they're having on campus, as well as what they believe that we should be doing or could be doing to improve campus climate. In analyzing these responses, and there were over 3,000 of them, there weren't specific categories where we could say the majority of students talked about one or two issues, but there were general themes and how they discussed campus climate overall that you see here on the slide. In the first theme, it was very personal, and students talked about their own experiences inside and outside of the classroom, including what they personally needed in order to feel a stronger sense of belonging on campus. For the second theme, students talked about campus climate in relation to others at the community level, oftentimes asking for more meaningful engagement between students and between students, staff, and faculty. What we learned in this theme is that students are often feeling some sense of community, but are really hoping for more opportunities to engage with those who they perceive to be different from themselves. And in the final theme, we heard about campus climate at the institutional level, where students talked about how they'd like the university to visibly support, or in some cases explicitly condemn, a variety of events, behaviors, and views on campus. In our preliminary analysis, what we have here is a multi-level view of how students are viewing campus climate, and it also lets us center their voices as we consider our future efforts to improve campus climate. Starting with the first theme at the individual level of campus climate, the common thread that you'll see, so we have quotes here that represent many of the topics that students talked about, and the common thread is around a sense of isolation or marginalization, both inside and outside of the classroom. Students talked about how difficult it is to be the only person like them in a variety of spaces. As you can see, sometimes it was around race and feeling and oftentimes being the only person of their racial group in a classroom. Other times, many students talked about political views, particularly conservative political views, feeling that if they openly expressed them, they would have negative interactions from their peers or in some cases faculty members. As one of these quotes shows, some students also talked about the rural-urban divide. And at the core of this is how harmful it is when people interact with you based on their negative assumptions and biases about you or members of your community. I can say it was difficult to read some of these quotes, both personally and professionally. As a person of color who was a student and a PSEO student on this campus 20 years ago, I had some of these same experiences, and I know that we've come a long way in 20 years. One of the things that's important is we're openly having this discussion today where we are centering the voices of students. But with that being said, we do have a number of efforts on campus to increase and support diversity in its many forms.
So when we look at what the university is doing in response to these needs, we really focused on the efforts to increase diversity and to support diversity. So in response to the students being the only or misunderstood, we really look at how we are providing programs and groups and spaces for students to be able to come together around their shared identities and experiences. So from some of the previous work we've done, we have gathered kind of the categories that this work falls under. So thinking about ways that students can come together around belonging and community. Our student groups play a really important role in that, even as you heard with the PSEO presentation. Student success and academic support, how the advising is really supporting them, that wraparound services that we're providing students based on their identity and the individual needs they may have. Looking at leadership development and engagement opportunities, want to make sure every student has the opportunity to study abroad and to be able to be part of our research mission and how we make that welcoming and accessible. And then we heard from those comments as well about how students, it's important to the student experience to see people that look like them in the leadership roles, in faculty and teaching them so that they can have those resources and have those people to go to as well to support and to understand their experiences. We reported earlier on the Multicultural Student Success Committee that back in the spring that we had launched that group, and we have finished that work in the sense that we have a report and recommendations. And part of what we discovered is that in this area of how we're supporting students, we have some work to do in terms of aligning those programs maybe more efficiently and also looking at maybe where those gaps are. So we were able to kind of map them out over the course of the 4-year experience and looking at where we have some strength areas, but then also where we see some gaps in terms of where students could benefit from more support.
In regard to the second theme around campus climate at a community level, students talked about two aspects of interactional diversity. The first is that they wanted more opportunities to engage across difference, usually talking about issues that are hot topics in higher education right now and are oftentimes seen as contentious. As students wanted more of those spaces, they were also saying they wanted opportunities to develop their intercultural competence, which is having the skills and the knowledge needed to work and communicate effectively and sensitively across difference. So students held both of those, knowing that not only do you have to have the facilitated spaces, but you also have to have the skills necessary to do that well. It's important to note that students also talked about wanting faculty and staff to have training in intercultural competence, which highlights the point made earlier that how students are viewing campus climate is impacted by their experiences in the classroom and with employees at the university. And in regard to interactional diversity and increasing intercultural competence, we do have a number of programs available at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
So we think about advancing this theme in the ways that we offer training and development. So we certainly have some amazing opportunities and programs. The Equity and Diversity Certificate Program, which many faculty, staff, and students take advantage of. We find ways to provide staff training at different levels. Sometimes it's within a unit. I know within academic advising, there's a lot of training around this topic. I think in various departments and also in different units that there's a strong commitment to be able to really invest in the training and continuing to make this a priority. We talked about the classroom climate, and I know there's some recent energy around really having those conversations and for faculty to be building respectful classrooms. The Center for Educational Innovation has really has this as their focus this year, as a stronger focus. And we just recently had a faculty workshop along with the Academy of Distinguished Teachers. College of Liberal Arts as well is kicking off a Making Excellence Inclusive initiative this year. We also look at opportunities for speakers and events on campus, and sometimes that can be a little tricky, but the ways that we are able to have, to demonstrate in different historical pieces, to have some educational moments for us to be able to be in partnership and discuss and dialogue these different issues. And certainly the ways that we communicate on an ongoing basis around campus climate newsletter, different more informal, maybe dialogue-based opportunities for us to come together. That provides us an opportunity to give feedback to each other and to learn and grow.
In regard to the final theme of campus climate at the institutional level, this one was very interesting because students oftentimes talked about wanting the university discussed as one entity to reflect their views, values, or perspectives. As we know, in a large, complex institution, that's very challenging, particularly around issues where there are opinions and points of view that are in contention with one another. Students also talked about wanting to have a shared sense of governance in the university and really wanted to have their voices heard in important decisions at the university level and to be consulted, which we thought was very positive because even with some of the challenges that we face, there's a lot of motivation for students to want to be engaged in continually improving their experiences on campus. Even though it's difficult to reflect the values of individuals and communities, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to improve campus climate. It actually emphasizes the importance of having a variety of offerings available on campus that meet the needs of students who hold a diversity of views and experiences, and also continually having feedback mechanisms to hear from students about what they need and how those needs are evolving over time. When you look across the three themes, we can also see the importance of having spaces where you're more comfortable, that can be a secure base, where then you can interact around difference and be able to have those highly important debates that contribute to our learning. So it's both of those, having the spaces where you're more comfortable and the spaces where you're pushing yourself that lead to optimal learning, and the institution comes into play and how we model that and provide spaces for those types of engagement. And in regard to campus climate at the institutional level, Dr. Moline will talk about some of our efforts now.
So we thought about the way that we respond to university needs. We think about this both from being proactive and in the ways that we're reactive. So we think about how we introduce students and faculty and staff to campus. So for undergraduate students, the messages and expectations about being a community member in orientation and welcome week, the different first year programs that we have, how we help with the transitioning programs for students about entering our community and what our expectations and values are as a collective. We have ongoing strategies that we think about. So when we think about addressing the more embedded systemic changes that we need to address or the barriers that students, that's work that's been going on for a long time and continues to go on. And so we need to really kind of have a commitment to that ongoing effort. But then there's also then the reactive ways, the ways that those moments in the moment of issues that come up, and when students experience bias, how are we there to support students? How do we respond? Students, again, are looking for us to be able to take a stand at those times of controversy. They're asking for us to be more transparent. And sometimes we know that that's tricky depending on the situation. That's how public it can be. But we really want to continue to build those strong relationships, to set those expectations and build a foundation of trust, which I think is what will be foundational to help us to be more proactive in our response and to be able to be more open and transparent.
Finally, we also wanted to include some of the positive experiences that students noted in their responses. It's easy when we're talking about campus climate to focus on the negative, and I don't want to minimize the importance of addressing discrimination, harassment, bias, and reducing disparities. But while we do that, we also need to highlight the great things that are happening on the Twin Cities campus as well as across the university system. And many students either didn't have much to say because they were doing pretty well, or also in this case, as you see represented in the quotes, talked about the meaningful experiences they've had on campus that have contributed to their personal and academic development. So we have positive and negative data, we have proactive and reactive approaches, and it's taking all of those together that give us a better view of campus climate overall. And I feel very honored to be the person who was talking about the student voices and experiences here. I think 20-year-old me would be really impressed to see me here today. So thank you, and Dr. Moline will close our presentation with a discussion about our future efforts around campus climate.
So as you probably know, and I've heard over many presentations at the university, we've been working on this for a long time. This is not something that's just been something we've just started to look at. But I think the student comments really help to frame it in ways that really help us articulate, I think, more clearly the different spheres of how we approach it. So again, we are looking at the ways to increase and support student diversity, about how we look at our programs and services that we're offering, and that individual students, especially from underrepresented backgrounds, find that sense of community here on campus. The ways that we work across difference, and then the ways that we also are responsive and inclusive from the beginning. We are more specifically working to advance the Multicultural Student Success Committee report and recommendations. We're working to align our services and programs. We're looking at ways to expand the opportunities for training and development for all of us, and explore ways to assess different aspects of climate. I think we have some good work to be able to do in terms of understanding it more clearly and aligning our strategy with those assessment results. And I think from the beginning, embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion work as an initial lens to our work, rather than the add-on that comes later on. As the definition of campus climate and really the scope of it continues to expand, I think that's where our work will continue to be, is how we understand that and how we understand how it impacts the experience of being here on campus. So thank you.
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to reiterate. It is complicated, it is multifaceted, it's multifactorial, it's hard to assess. There are positive and negative aspects to it, but what is unquestioned is our resolve to be active, to be intentional, and for these efforts to be ongoing, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Go. Assistant Vice President Jafar, I just have to say to you, if a 20-year-old you could have never seen you sitting there, I will guarantee you that a 20-year-old me could have never seen me sitting here. So I think it's wonderful, and going through these slides, but what I kept seeing is the different segments of this community here on campus. When I'd read what some people would say, and then a different segment would say something that was very similar, I think that the different segments of this campus have much more in common that we don't even realize than we have apart. So I think, thank you for what you're doing. I think that's something to really build on, that we do have a lot of commonality. With that, we do have 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to start with Regent Sviggum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to think in my mind what a 20-year-old Chairman Anderson looked like.
You don't want to know.
He'd be transferring between classes in and out of the university.
That's 3 times, I think I heard. Members, and thank you for the report. If you would you put up pages 64 and 65? And members, if you look at it just very briefly, and I mean no ill will to anyone, but we got some problems. Even if you don't have a conservative bone in your body, Not even if you had one conservative, and it makes no difference to me whether you do or don't. Please look at the campus climate by political orientation. It's on page, I think that's on page 65.
I think you're referring to the
document.
Oh, the document, oh, they don't have
I
that.
don't know if they have a slide on it.
Okay, we have the slide,
Yep.
so we can't put it up.
No,
We can't put it up there.
we don't have a slide on it.
Okay, but members can look at it in your docket, right? And members, maybe to follow through on some comments that maybe Regent Rocha and myself made last summer at our retreat. We have some real problems. Dr. Mellon said that, I think your quote was, in the responses that we got from these different campus climate groups, 60 and 40% are disappointing, I think is the word you used. I wrote that down anyway. And Dr. Goh said, feeling respected and valued is important to belonging and important to your university experience. And you look at page 64 and 65, members, and you see the response by campus climate by religion, by social class, by disability, by sexual orientation, race and ethnicity. You know, they're all somewhere in the 60s, 70s, even 80s. Until you get down to political orientation. And those who tend to maybe have a conservative bone in their body are seen being respected by 24%, 13%. And Dr. Mellon said 60 and 40% was disappointing. Dr. Mellon, what's 13%? I mean, that should be shocking. That should be appalling to all of us, whether you be no matter where you are on the political spectrum, it should be alarming. I think we've got a problem that this really, really shows more vividly than I could have stated other than using the example before us. And it's something we have to address, members, if we want to have a diversity in this campus. Not only of race, not only of ethnicity, not only of sexual orientation, but a diversity of that's thought too. And I just wanted to bring it up to my colleagues here that, you know, there's problems that exist out there more than just the typical diversity we might think about.
Do you have any comments on that? Any of you or
They don't need to, Mr. Chairman. I'm not asking for a comment. I don't want to put them on the spot or do anything that would, I just want us to be aware of it and sensitive.
Dr. Goh?
If I may, Chair Anderson, Regents Figum, thank you for the question, members of the committee. I think in response to Chair Anderson's appreciating the differences in how we celebrate differences and your suggestion that we may be able to find more common ground, Regents Figum, what I take to heart from your comment is not that there is difference, which is accentuated, I think, by what you perceive as the numbers and the data. I think our goal as a higher education institution is the responsibility to teach individuals how to engage. To teach our community how to engage in that difference. I think that is one of the missions of the university. We are greater because of, as we say, the diversity of our views and opinions. And I think that responsibility is reflected in some of the activities that aim to not only bring people together, to have an element of listening and empathy and understanding across differences, but also I welcome the opportunity or the invitation I have for faculty to learn how to facilitate and lead some of those conversations in the classroom, for which our Center for Educational Innovation has done quite a good job equipping some of our faculty to learn how to invite different opinions in the classrooms. But I will give that the best is yet to be.
Sure. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, if I could, yes, I'm just thinking about going back to our last discussion about retention of faculty. maybe this also has to be an issue about recruitment of some faculty too. That might be important to make campus climate more respected and belonging to all. It's shocking to me. I don't know.
You know, what you see, Regent Smig, I mean, I'll be honest, I see it on page 65, is those with very liberal, or slightly liberal viewpoints grow more and more that their group is respected. And those with slightly conservative, and very conservative viewpoints goes less and less and their viewpoint is respected. So that does show a slight trend. I mean, I don't disagree with you. We do have a couple other speakers. Student Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters. I was wondering, how far back does the SERU data go, and is it publicly available?
That's a great question. I know for sure 2015, obviously that's what we presented. I want to say it went back. I don't know exactly how far back it goes, but it is fairly recent for us. It is available on the Office of Institutional Research webpage, and so you can get, it is public data.
I'm sorry, the Office of what?
Office of Institutional Research, oir.umn.edu.
Thank you.
We have Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I mean, I'm not really surprised by any of this. It's, you know, University of Minnesota, this is how it's been. I think 20 years ago, it was maybe a little bit worse. We didn't have some of these other categories. The survey wouldn't have had some of these categories on there, but, you know, it's not really shocking. It may be bad, but it's not shocking. So the question I have for you is, you know, you have a pretty big budget. How do you allocate your budget to these various areas? I mean, I think you can look through here, you can say, I've got a problem here, I got a problem here, I got a problem there. Where do you want to see the most change? And what are you doing to achieve that? And are you using, is the SERU data the kind of what is going to guide your work going forward? Or anybody can answer, right?
Chair Anderson, Regents Hsu, members of the committee, thank you for the question. I think actually, as I alluded to earlier, there are multiple individuals and leaders who can can respond to that question, because the budget of the Student Affairs Office, the budget of the Provost Office, the budget of Equity and Diversity, the budget of the Graduate School, the budget of the Undergraduate Education Office, all represent, I feel, multiple efforts as reflected in some of the slides. But if I were to roughly categorize, currently a big chunk of the Equity and Diversity budget, for example, goes to the Disability Resource Center, in which we're seeing an increase in students, and it contributes to climate, feeling a sense that their needs, their accommodations are being met, whether it's learning styles, learning disabilities, or student mental health related. There is what was presented, and it's viewed more as reaction, but I think it's necessary for federal compliance, the Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action Office, in compliance with Title IX, in compliance with discrimination. There are resources allocated to having to address individuals who feel either discriminated or biased based on various identities. But in terms of more hopefulness, I think a big chunk of our budget is trying to focus on what is also mission, vision, values-oriented, which is on education. How can we create programming, which I think currently exists, whether it's bringing a speaker to campus, whether it's facilitating circle dialogues that addresses in the scholarship area the need to help individuals become more aware, become knowledgeable, and ultimately develop and grow the skills to know how to enact and react or engage, as I said. So to some extent, a lot of our presentation reflects the definition that I presented to the Board of Regents in our last conversation of campus climate. It is the, if you think of how I think about budget addressing all these categories, the American Association of Colleges and Universities defines inclusion as the active, intentional, ongoing engagement with diversity. In the curriculum, for which you see some of the efforts addressing faculty, addressing student leadership, but also in the co-curriculum and in the dimensions that are indicated, the social, the cultural, the intellectual, the geographical, so that our students can learn how to be skilled to address some of this diversity. And the outcomes that we measure it is also in the definition by AAC&U, which is how does it increase awareness? How does it increase content knowledge? How does it increase cognitive sophistication? And how does it eventually engender a sense of empathy for others on campus, which is at the heart of, I think, what our presentation and the qualitative data is highlighting. So those are some elements in which we arrange, I think, the data, the budget, allocate the budget.
Sure.
Go
ahead.
We're going to keep moving here, okay? Do you have a brief answer to that on the budget?
No, go ahead. You're fine.
We've got, the Regents have a appointment with faculty at 5:30, and it's about 5:05 right now, so we got a couple more speakers. I just want to keep moving, so if we can get that.
Can I have a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
She should answer then. I mean, she should have a chance to answer.
Okay. My response was thinking in the world of undergraduate education, and as we think about serving some of these students, I know that there's a commitment from the colleges as we think about individual support for these students, so advisor-student ratio, having some of the mental health support, having the individual mentorship and leadership is really part of the strategy, I think, about how we support students because of how complicated all this is and all the different ways identity comes to play. I think sometimes that holistic and individual support is one of the key strategies. We're aligning our resources as best as possible.
Thank you. And then,
go ahead. I forgot about you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Go, I think you mentioned the fact that it sounded like you were actually bringing speakers to campus to speak to students. Did I miss something there? Or?
No, we are not.
You do not. So that's not part of your budget.
Sorry.
Yeah. Not part.
I'm not aware if it's part of their budget. You're asking the wrong guy.
Okay. I thought you said that, so I was just curious who you were.
No, sorry.
To campus.
Dr. Go.
Regent Shu, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. I was responding to how the slides represent the multifaceted ways in which our multiple offices try to program in all our budgets to address campus climate. And that includes what you will see, both student groups requesting support from student affairs to bring in speakers. In a few weeks' time, I think there is a scholar on campus climate, Dr. Jeff Millam from the University of California, Santa Barbara, that comes to share his wisdom from his own scholarship area. So that's what I meant by speakers.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, just a couple of quick comments. This is an enormous conversation. I mean, this is the topic, I think, really in our society right now. When we think about the types of risks that we face as humans are quite different than they were a century ago, where you had many children in hopes of some of them making it to adulthood. And today we now have, relative security. And so we get into a lot more of these kinds of conversations. And it's one of the areas where I think some people would suggest that the academy is maybe just a little bit out of alignment with general society, but oftentimes the academy is a leader in taking on these kinds of issues. I would make one quick comment about the topic that Regent Svigum raised, and he did bring up that the conversation about faculty and faculty retention. I'm not entirely surprised by the numbers, in part because when you break out the different categories of respondents, that particular category doesn't fall into a protected class. Your political view is not something that grants you some sort of protection. Therefore, if you deal with slights, and I certainly recall observing these conversations as a student at the university, it's somewhat with impunity that a person can sort of be called out, and you could have faculty that just sort of take certain truths to be self-evident, and it's not offensive to say something when somebody who holds an alternative view might see things quite differently. And so that becomes somewhat of an awareness. I would also suggest that those students who are sort of forged by fire, if they do find themselves, probably get a better education than people who never confront viewpoints that are different than their own. And so we're really doing, you do a disservice to all students if you suppress certain viewpoints, because I think that's really what people can gain here. The last point, the question I would ask, when I observe these data points, and I think they're so important, I really think they show a number of things. I think, one, they do show that there's more work to do. We need to constantly look to remove barriers for different groups to ensure that they are represented. But I'm also concerned about creating a zeitgeist, if you will. It creates a standard that's impossible to capture, which is that the only way that you can be taught well is by somebody who comes from your tribal group, whether it's your gender, whether it's your race, that we have to have the ability to learn from people who are not the same as we are. And I know, and some would suggest that coming from a demographic or sharing a demographic, I don't know why it necessarily doesn't pay my mortgage, but some would suggest that since I share the demographic with the folks that have dominated these types of positions historically, that it's easy for me to say. But I perish the idea that my daughters would feel they can only learn from female teachers, for instance, and that they have the ability to recognize that we are all part of the same community, and that they can learn something from anybody regardless of what their background is. Do we do anything for our students to ensure that we're not sort of reinforcing this inability to sort of glean from folks of difference? Because I'm fairly confident that once they move out of the university environment, the real world doesn't provide the same things that we provide in addressing some of these concerns. How are we empowering people to deal with this dissatisfaction in a way that is good for their mental health and good for their long-term prospects when they leave the university?
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, thanks for the question. I can only speak for myself for now, although as an administrator, I'm becoming more aware of other faculty, other colleagues, other departments and units that I think, again, to reiterate, I don't think a lot of my colleagues who invite scholars, invite workshops, or the trainings or the activities that they create for their students are done haphazardly. I think they're done with a vision and a purpose on the spectrum of awareness, knowledge, skills. And when I say I speak for myself, I'll briefly just mention my scholarship in multicultural counseling, my most current scholarship in teacher education, and then most recently in the intercultural education space requires me to train my students to work across that difference. And in order to work across that difference, some of the pedagogy does require them to engage, to be immersed, to be introduced to communities, to viewpoints that are different from themselves. And we've, I think, improved in both my counseling and teacher education realms in doing better than just textbook by introducing community engagement, by introducing videos for lack of real life experiences. Study abroad is afforded as one opportunity, but we are a rich community that affords, I think, some of these pedagogical, creative, innovative ways to help our students engage, learn from, encounter, and then learn how to bridge the difference. I think the pedagogy especially is self-critical in saying that a lot of our teaching and training of students has emphasized describing difference a lot without necessarily teaching our students how to bridge those differences. So you will hear in our Office for Equity and Diversity an emphasis on teaching capabilities, if we can, building the capacity of our students. And I can speak a lot more, but I know our time is limited.
Let's hold it. It's too important a subject to just leave. So, we're just going to go on. We got two more questioners, and hopefully we can be brief. Regent Kenyana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, presenters, very much for your time. Before I go on to my comments, just as a response to what Regent Rocha was saying, I think we all agree that it'd be silly if you expected only to learn from people who share your identities. But just using myself as an example, throughout all K-12, started kindergarten in Minnesota, graduated college in Minnesota. I had one black male teacher, and that was my junior year of college. And I learned a lot actually from all those other teachers who weren't male or who weren't black. But I think it's it's for your daughter's example. She can certainly learn from men, but you'd want a few women sprinkled in there. But anyway, onto my original comments. VP Gold, when we met earlier in the summer with the new Regents, you talked a lot about teaching, and that's what the university does best. And I think that's certainly a place for this to occur, specifically thinking of our liberal education in general, education requirements and how that's addressing some of this need for this kind of learning. And I don't know if there's a way to measure how effective that is or how that's been, and I know we're going through a review of that. So that's a thought / question maybe. And then lastly, as I look at these, the interesting thing, not in a good way, is that everyone's numbers are going down year over year. You look at the low income students, their numbers are going down expected. But you look at the wealthy students and their numbers are going down. And obviously it's not a zero sum kind of thing. It's not like, you take a percentage and shift it over here. But that's not good. And ideally we'd love to see all of these at 100. That's not realistic, but that's what it is. I wouldn't want to get in the business of ranking the different identities and whatnot. I don't think that's appropriate. But there is one way that just sticks out to me in terms of delineating them. And that's identities you can change and identities you can't change. Regent Swigum, you might become liberal one day, who knows, but to my knowledge, well, Regent Rocha used to be never mind. We know that, but here's my point. To my knowledge, you are, and for the foreseeable future will remain white. So there's those identities that can change, and there's those that it is what you are, and that's just, take that for what you are.
Regent Kenyanya, thanks for your perspective. Thanks very much for your perspective. Regent Beeson, you had a question, and then if Dr. Gold has an answer to either of them, we'll let him answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like the data, excuse me, approach to the work that you've done. The data does tell a story. All the numbers are decreasing. I think that is indicative of the fact that we're in this polarized society. The political affiliation is stark. It's really poor, that number. But all the elements have to do with tolerance and with civility. And I don't know. So what are we going to do with all this? I think we have to work with faculty and the staff and students about this topic. We have to train. We have to train people. They're not learning this at home. Okay, they're getting influenced and they're coming to the university with these predispositions. So we as a school, as an educational institution, have to, that's what we do. So let's do this. These are soft skills. Talk about soft skills, people skills. This is where it all shows up. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Great comments. Thank you, panel. Thank you for being here. We're going to move on to our last item of business. Thank you very much. Our last item, Provost Hansen here to my left, is going to give us the consent report, and I think there's only one item. I will ask her to introduce that item, and then I'll ask for a motion.
College of Continuing and Professional Studies is adding a subplan in environmental health and safety to their Bachelor of Applied Science and Construction Management.
Okay.
That's it.
Is there a motion to recommend? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent report signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Just a plug for the information items. Lots of faculty and staff getting awards and honors, and this has been an emotional roller coaster day. Those are all good. You'll feel good reading those.
I did not adjourn us. You got to do that. Any reason not to adjourn?